Chapter 52, Bumper Crop. Once he could endure. Twice, 3 times, 4 times, even 5 times he could continue to endure. By the 6th time, however, he was shamed into a rage. The heaven-entangling net was even more precious to him than the scroll painting. It could instantly entangle an opponent and had been among his treasured items for years. The higher your cultivation base, the more effective it became. He had placed it on the treasure mountain to show off its splendor so that people would see it and covet it. He had assumed it would be safe, never imagining anyone could actually take it. Now he had begun to go mad, wishing only to beat Meng Hao to death and recover the scroll painting and heaven-entangling net. But then Wu Dinkyu, laughing smugly, flicked his wide sleeve and stood in front of eccentric Song, blocking his way. Fellow Taoist Song is an illustrious cultivator from the southern domain. What are you doing, exactly? Earlier, you said that for 7 days anyone could come here, and that all of the treasures of the treasure mountain were available for the taking. Don't tell me you're going to go back on your word. You carried the peak here yourself from Mount Tianshan. The land was fertilized with soil from the bottom of the East Sea which hadn't seen daylight in 10,000 years. I remember someone saying that any cultivator of the Qi condensation stage could prevail as long as they were skilled enough. Eccentric Song, acting thus shows a lack of demeanor. If word gets out, you'll definitely lose face. Wu Dinkyu continued to laugh, clearly unwilling to let eccentric Song leave. Eccentric Song's expression grew worse, filled with bitter suffering. Before, he had spoken with utmost complacency, but now everything he had said was being thrown back in his face. After a long moment, he slapped his bag of holding, pulled out 2 large concentration pills and swallowed them down. His eyes flashed, and he cast his consciousness toward Meng Hao to gather information about his iron spear. As soon as his consciousness emerged, Wu Dinkyu laughed and flicked his sleeve. A glowing shield immediately covered the entire plateau, blocking eccentric Song's consciousness. Using your consciousness to inspect a lower-generation Qi condensation cultivator, eccentric Song, are you purposely trying to lose face? Wu Dinkyu was unwilling to let eccentric Song have his way in anything. He laughed. Eccentric Song, looking more put off than ever, could only flick his own sleeve. Another shield appeared just beyond the first. That kid's iron spear is extraordinary, he said. If you won't allow me to inspect it with my consciousness, then I won't let you do so either. 4 hours later, Meng Hao reached the mountain's peak, iron spear in hand. He looked around, finally noticing a large flag stuck into the ground. Beneath it was a bag. Its surface was a mass of rioting colors. Looking at it made you feel it could suck your mind out. Everything around it seemed to ripple and blur. When Meng Hao laid eyes on it, he trembled with eagerness. He grabbed the multicolored bag, and when he did, the flag fell. Conversations buzzed among the onlookers in the demonic forest as they watched Meng Hao calmly walk up the mountain, collecting spirit stones and medicinal pills. When the flag toppled, more conversations broke out. They gazed at Meng Hao with shock and envy, and then watched as he disappeared over the other side of the mountain. Shang Ziu glared murderously as Meng Hao vanished. He dared not pursue him, there were too many unknowns. Though his desire to kill Meng Hao burned stronger than ever, he knew it was almost too late to reach his medicinal plant. Gnashing his teeth, he stamped his foot, looking pitiful, but anger pushed away his depression. He would have killed Meng Hao if he could only think of a way. As Meng Hao disappeared over the mountain's other side, Wu Dinkyu's laughter rang out. Eccentric Song stared with wide eyes as Meng Hao took his bag of the cosmos. The blood drained from his face. He seemed heartbroken. Now more than ever he regretted putting it on the mountain. This time, he truly couldn't endure any longer. He flicked his sleeve to pursue the damnable Meng Hao, but before he could leave, Wu Dinkyu blocked his way. "Wu Dinkyu, you still dare block me," shouted eccentric Song, heartbroken. "The flag has fallen. You didn't win our bet and I didn't lose. The trial is over. If you continue to obstruct my way, you can't blame me for attacking you." "Fellow Taoist Song, we agreed ahead of time that neither of us would leave before finishing this game of Go. You are a grand, illustrious cultivator of the southern domain. Don't tell me you're going to break your word. When I made to leave earlier, you wouldn't let me. Yet you wished to leave before finishing our game." Wu Dinkyu laughed, using eccentric Song's own words against him. His face was filled with a wide smile, clearly unwilling to let the other man leave. Seeing the bag of the cosmos taken away had filled his heart with joy. Eccentric Song had waved that bag in front of him mockingly for hundreds of years. To see him hoisted on his own petard was delightful. "You?" Eccentric Song glared murderously at Wu Dinkyu and said nothing for a long moment. Then he gritted his teeth and stamped his foot, shaking the mountain as if it would collapse. But considering his status and prestige, he could only sit back down and begin playing Go again. Of course, Wu Dinkyu wouldn't let him have his way. He stroked his beard, looking at eccentric Song's unsightly expression. Laughing, he slowly picked up a go piece and put a thoughtful expression on his face. After a very long time, he slowly placed the piece on the board, his face solemn, as if he intended to make this game last for months. "Leave the mountain," said Wu Dinkyu, transmitting his voice to his white-robed disciples. "After I finish this game of Go, I will accompany you back to the sect. In the meantime, the next stage of your trial is to find the man you just saw on the mountain peak. I've taken a fancy to that treasured spear he has. Bring that spear to me, and you will be promoted to the inner sect." Each and every one of the disciples perked up. Is the dignified Violet Fate sect of the Southern Domain really going to kill people to take treasures? Said eccentric Song. He was stuck in place by his own words, but even though he hated Meng Hao, he couldn't pass up a chance to cause trouble for Wu Dinkyu. Glaring at eccentric Song, Wu Dinkyu said, "Listen well, you must not cause problems for that person. You must trade with him, not rob him. Anyone who violates this command will be expelled from the sect." His next move in the Go game was slower still. The Violet Fate sect disciples scattered in all directions. Some circled the treasure mountain in pursuit of Meng Hao, others went in different directions, hoping to intercept him. Their trial had been an utter defeat, something they weren't reconciled to. However, they held no ill will toward Meng Hao, but rather admired him. After all, they had all witnessed the blood-soaked events. All were determined to get the iron spear. They would trade anything to get it, and if he refused, would think of tricks. They had clearly heard Elder Wu's words. They were to trade for the item, not rob it, although he had never said they couldn't use force. As the white-robed disciples scattered, Meng Hao raced down the treasure mountain, collecting more spirit stones and medicinal pills. Though he never saw eccentric Song and Wu Dinkyu, he had guessed this was a trial region set up by some sect. Though Shangyuan Zhu was no longer chasing him, he knew that whoever's trial he had charged into might not be happy about his interference. He maintained top speed, his heart pounding and his face eager. His bags of holding were all full. He had acquired more this time than on any other occasion since entering the cultivation world, except from the cave of the flying rain dragon. He packed away the spirit stones and medicinal pills. The more things he picked up, the faster he tried to move. Gritting his teeth and continuously consuming demonic cores, he moved as fast as possible for 3 days, until he finally emerged from the mountain range. He looked both exhausted and energetic. Over the past days, he hadn't had a chance to organize his treasures, and now he wanted only to find a safe place to examine them. As he moved forward, he noticed a walled city in the distance. He was in the east of the state of Zhao, and this city appeared magnificent and beyond ordinary. It was surrounded by a gentle glowing light, a shield only cultivators could sense. This place, it doesn't seem like a mortal city. Could it be a cultivator city? He stared in surprise, recalling a map of the state of Zhao. The map had not shown any city here, yet at the gate people came in and out, almost all of them cultivators of the qi condensation stage. His assumption had been correct. He decided not to enter the city. Instead, he found a cave in the nearby mountains. Concealing himself inside, he took a deep breath and then began to take everything out of his bags of holding and sort them. What medicinal pill is this? It's incredibly fragrant, stronger than a dry spirit pill. And this bottle, it has 3 pills inside, each as transparent as crystal. They are definitely treasured pills. Licking his lips, he emptied 2 bags of holding. After counting everything, he found 78 pills. There were many different types, each seemingly stronger than a dry spirit pill. Meng Hao's hands shook. It took a long time for him to collect himself. Stifling his excitement, he pulled out 10 more bags of holding. There were so many spirit stones on that treasure mountain. I just picked up the ones I noticed without paying much attention, yet I acquired so many. He began breathing hard as he looked at all the spirit stones. When he put them together and counted, he found 8,764. "I'm rich, rich," he murmured. He pulled out another bag of holding, inside of which were flying swords, pearls, 2 flags, a scroll painting, a black net. All of them were magical items. His smile nearly split his face as he took the items out. This was especially true when he took out the scroll painting and the black net. They emitted powerful spiritual power, making his heart beat rapidly. He slowly unrolled the scroll painting, and bright lights shone out, filling the cave and illuminating his face. Inside, he could see mountains and waters within which existed a multitude of fantastic creatures. They had been painted, yet somehow seemed alive. As he opened the scroll, he seemed to hear the roars of tens of thousands of beasts echoing faintly. His heart shook, and he dropped the painting. After some time passed, he recovered. His eyes shining, he calmed his aura and picked up the painting again to examine it. It was clearly an incredibly valuable treasure. "A treasure? What a true treasure," he said, breathing deeply. Then he pulled out the black net. Walking out of the cave, he poured some spiritual energy into it, then tossed it into the air. The black net instantly expanded, growing larger and larger, flying higher into the sky. It seemed big enough to envelop the whole mountain like a powerful black cloud. The mountain began to shake, cracks appearing on its surface as if it would collapse. The suppressive power increased, making Meng Hao's heart tremble. Astonished, he lifted his hand, sending out his spiritual energy to slowly shrink the black cloud. It transformed into a black beam that shot back toward him and became a small black net. He grabbed the net, his mouth dry. He breathed for a while, composing himself. "This is better than the best treasures from the Reliance sect," he thought, his heart pounding. Then he pulled out the last item, the multicolored bag. Chapter 53, How Will You Thank Me? "This looks kind of like a bag of holding, but a bit better." Meng Hao moved it back and forth in his hands, then used his spiritual power to feel it out. Suddenly, his body began to tremble as if struck by invisible lightning. His eyes widened in complete astonishment. After a long time passed, he lowered his head and looked into the bag. "It's so big," he murmured. It was a bag of holding, but was so large inside that it seemed as if it could contain heaven and earth. The insides were misty and so boundless that Meng Hao's heart immediately shook. It seemed as if entire mountains and rivers could be stored inside. Though empty, its massive capacity made the bag itself a precious treasure. Meng Hao's mouth and tongue were dry. The spirit stones had made him happy, the medicinal pills made him quiver with eagerness, the scroll painting shocked him, and the spiritual might of the black net had left him shaken. But this bag left his head buzzing. It took a long time to compose himself. "I'm rich, this is true wealth," Meng Hao muttered to himself, gripping the multicolored bag tightly. But then the expression on his face suddenly changed. "If that was truly some great sex trial, it wouldn't be a big deal if I interfered, but they surely won't let me get away with so many treasures, medicinal pills and spirit stones." His heart began to thump. However, he was determined not to give up the treasures he had acquired. He organized everything carefully, then took a deep breath and looked at the evening. He emerged from the cave and left the mountains, looking thoughtfully at the walled city in the distance. "I have a lot of medicinal pills," he muttered to himself as he gazed at the city with glittering eyes, "but I don't recognize any of them. Therefore, I can't safely consume any of them." He began to walk toward the city. He moved quickly and soon approached the city gate, above which were written 3 characters. Eastern Refinement City. The characters had an ancient feel to them, and had clearly been there for more than just a few years. Their faded surfaces made one feel as if they had seen ages come and go. Refinement is similar to cultivation, and this is the East. The city's name is straightforward. TL note: the character for refinement is pronounced similar to the character for cultivation. As soon as Meng Hao stepped foot into the city gate, he saw 2 disciples standing there chatting. Their gaze settled onto Meng Hao. They wore light blue robes and were both at the 3rd level of qi condensation. "Fellow Taoist, please pay your tax before entering the city." His smile disappeared as he felt the pressure of Meng Hao's cultivation base. "Fellow Taoists, I can tell from a glance that you are from a great sect. I myself am from a small sect and just came off the mountain. This being my first time here, could I trouble you two to give me some information about this place?" Meng Hao was innately scholarly and spoke politely. The 2 low-level cultivators were instantly impressed, and the young man who had just spoken laughed. "Well spoken, fellow Taoist, your cultivation base is quite refined. If this is your first time out of the sect, your name will become well known in the future." The young man smiled. For someone with such a profound cultivation base to treat him politely pleased him greatly. "This is Eastern Refinement City, founded by the 3 great sect alliance of the state of Zhao. To enter, you have to pay a tax of 1 spirit stone. The cost is actually 3 spirit stones, but for you, just 1 will do. Please note, fighting is forbidden within the city limits. Violators will be punished severely by the 3 sects. You must not forget this point." He held out a wooden tablet to Meng Hao. Meng Hao thanked him and paid his 1 spirit stone. Then he saluted with clasped hands and passed through the gate. He felt regret about the spirit stone. It was only 1, but it was still money. He might have over 8,000 more in his bag, but he was very familiar with the copper mirror's appetite for spirit stones. "What an expensive tax. If I didn't have to come here, I wouldn't pay it." He walked quickly through the city, looking around. Dusk was falling, but the city still bustled with people. The streets were filled with shops, most emitting bright glowing lights. Everyone was a cultivator. He didn't see a single mortal. However, all of these cultivators were at the qi condensation stage. Scanning the crowds, Meng Hao saw only about 3 people at the 7th level like him. Most were at the 6th or lower. Meng Hao walked down the broad streets looking for medicinal pill shops. He didn't buy any but asked questions. Over 3 days, Meng Hao traversed the city, visiting over 30 medicinal pill shops. Still, he could only find information about 7 or 8 of the dozens of types in his bag. Yet Meng Hao was excited. Of the pills he had learned about, each was considerably expensive. One was a spirit establishment pill, worth 50 spirit stones, only useful at the 7th level of qi condensation. In his bag of holding, he had 8 of them altogether. Too bad there are so many pills I still don't know about. On the 3rd day, Meng Hao hesitated, then walked into an extremely luxurious building in the Western District. It was 3 stories tall and emitted a glowing light. From a distance, one could see it shine. Meng Hao had noticed that almost everyone who entered was of the 6th level. There were even some of the 8th or 9th levels, and this seemed the only building they were willing to enter. When he saw the name on the building, he was even more resolved to enter. 100 Treasures Pavilion. The inside was filled with carved balustrades and marble steps. Everything seemed to be made of jade. As he stepped inside, Meng Hao felt a dense spiritual force brush against his face. A dazzling assortment of displayed items met his eyes. Medicinal pill bottles, flying swords, pearls, banners, and other items everywhere. There weren't many cultivators present, so it was relatively quiet. They walked around in groups of 4 or 5, each accompanied by a young woman in a long, pink dress. The girls' voices were light and airy, humbly answering all queries about the items. None of that interested Meng Hao much. What captured his attention was some distance away on the 2nd floor. Next to the staircase was an enormous pill furnace. Wisps of smoke curled around it, and sitting beside it was a middle-aged man in a long black robe. He sat cross-legged, back straight, expressionless, doing breathing exercises with his eyes closed. He emanated power, but it was difficult to sense, as if he kept most of it hidden. If he didn't, the entire pavilion would probably collapse. A foundation establishment cultivator. Meng Hao's pupils constricted. This middle-aged man emitted the same type of aura as Grand Elder Aoyang, making it immediately obvious to Meng Hao that his cultivation base was at the foundation establishment stage, far above everyone else's. I wonder if I will ever have a chance to be a foundation establishment cultivator. After all he had experienced in the Reliance sect, his heart was filled with the desire to become powerful. His head was lowered, but his eyes were filled with determination and stubbornness. Using the cultivation method of the Sublime Spirit Scripture, when I reach foundation establishment, it will be a flawless foundation, much more powerful than cracked or fragmented. I will be strong even among foundation establishment cultivators. He took a deep breath and raised his head. A young woman in a pink dress approached him. She was beautiful and wore a relaxed smile. She greeted Meng Hao with a slight bow. As she did, the front of her dress dropped, revealing soft skin. "Taoist brother, do you need any assistance?" she asked. Meng Hao's face turned scarlet, and he told himself he shouldn't look. Despite his determination, he glanced down, and his heart raced. Though he had been in the Reliance sect for 3 years, he hadn't spent time with female disciples other than Elder Sister Su. He hadn't seen anything like this in his entire life. "Do you have any jade slips which describe medicinal pills?" he asked with a dry cough, trying to cover up his embarrassment. The girl was young, but her demeanor suggested she was quite experienced. She could instantly sense Meng Hao's awkwardness and was amused. Throughout her years, she had seen many customers, but few like Meng Hao. Holding back a laugh, she smiled and leaned closer so he would catch her perfumed scent. When the fragrant scent reached him, his face grew redder. His eyes, however, contained no lust. They were wide and clear. He was fundamentally not given to lust, just inexperienced with women. "Of course we have jade slips regarding medicinal pills," she said with a wink. "Please follow me, Taoist brother." She found his awkwardness cute. She turned, her waist swaying. Meng Hao couldn't help but look, and his heart raced again. With a bitter smile, he coughed and hurried to follow. She led him to a lattice shelf filled with various pieces of jade. On a white tray were 3 slips of jade, inscribed with the characters 3 jade slip. These jade slips introduce most of the medicinal pills found in the state of Zhao. However, this is a copy, so the contents are somewhat unclear. When she saw him reach to take them, she smiled. "You can't look unless you buy. The 3 jade slip costs 100 spirit stones." When she smiled, 2 dimples appeared. She thought that though his face was a bit dark, it held a scholarly and youthful charm. As her perfume wafted around him, he pulled his hand back and focused. He looked at the 3 jade slip thoughtfully. It seemed a bit too expensive, and he was hesitant to spend that many spirit stones. "Is there anything that provides more information than this?" he asked, clenching his jaw. His whole purpose in coming here had been to buy a jade slip such as this. "Of course," replied the girl with another wink. "Follow me." She led Meng Hao to another corner, then pointed to a jade slip on a shelf. It was covered with small cracks. "This is not a copy. It's an ancient jade slip which contains records of the various medicinal pills of the southern domain. It even details information about poison pills and their antidotes. Furthermore, it contains very realistic artistic depictions of the pills. Unfortunately, it is cracked and will eventually shatter. You will only be able to read it 4 or 5 times." Hearing her words, Meng Hao's heart quivered. He needed it to solve his current situation. "Taoist brother, I hope you don't mind," she said with a smile, leaning close. "The cost of this item is 200 spirit stones. You should understand that if it weren't cracked, it would be worth over 1,000. If you really want it, I can help you apply for a cost reduction. But how will you thank me?" This chapter was sponsored by John Liu, Juan Reyes, and Mitchell Kutchuk. Chapter 54, An Old Friend from the Sect. I'm just a scholar," Meng Hao gaped, unsure how to respond. When he had bought things in Yunji County, he had never encountered a situation like this. To have a beautiful girl smiling sweetly at him caused his face to flush red again. Seeing his embarrassment, the young woman covered her mouth and laughed softly. She turned, her waist swaying as she walked to the pill oven. She lowered her head to speak to the middle-aged man sitting there. When she returned, she winked. "How about 170 spirit stones?" "Many thanks, fellow Taoist," said Meng Hao. Looking pleased at having saved spirit stones, he quickly saluted with clasped fists. "You can call me Big Sis," she said, holding the jade slips out to Meng Hao. He accepted them, then cast spiritual power into them. A vast tableau appeared in his mind. Glancing over it eagerly, he already noticed 3 of the pills in his bag. He pulled out the 170 spirit stones and gave them to the girl, then cupped his hands as he made to leave. The girl sighed and escorted him to the door. "My name is Kaio Ling," she said, her eyes filled with an interesting look. "Remember to ask for me next time you come." She looked him up and down as she spoke, her eyes charming and filled with poise. Meng Hao, face scarlet, saluted her and retreated as quickly as possible. His heart pounded as he left and didn't calm for quite some time. He looked back at the 100 Treasures Pavilion and caught sight of Kaio Ling smiling softly at him. He felt even more embarrassed. She had toyed with him. He had never experienced such a feeling before. It wasn't bad, and he actually enjoyed it. Coughing again, he lowered his head and continued walking. About this time, a group emerged from the 2nd floor of the 100 Treasures Pavilion. There were about 7 or 8 of them, men and women. As they walked, they chatted. Among them was a young man in a light blue robe, walking in the back. He didn't look like he belonged, as if he were an attendant. As the group left the pavilion, the young man happened to lift his head and catch sight of Meng Hao. "Meng Hao," he cried, staring. This caught the attention of the other men and women, as well as Meng Hao, who stopped walking and looked back to see all of them looking at him. His expression did not change, but he felt conflicting emotions. The young man was none other than Zhou Kai, former disciple of the Reliance Outer Sect. His cultivation base was at the 5th level of Qi condensation. On the day of the sect's dissolution, the red fog had cast him out, and here he was. He seemed down and out, following a group in expensive, brocaded garments. Most had threatening demeanors, and one was at the 7th level of Qi condensation. The rest appeared to be at the 6th. They were clearly members of the great sects of the state of Zhao. Obviously, Zhou Kai had joined them after the sect's dissolution and could only claim the status of an attendant. Meng Hao nodded to him but didn't say anything. He turned and made to leave. "Who is this?" said a young man standing next to Zhou Kai. He spoke lightly, but with pride and arrogance. He wore a resplendent robe and held a fan. He was at the 7th level of Qi condensation, and the others around them began to whisper and watch. "Elder brother's son, this is a fellow member of my former sect," said Zhou Kai hesitatingly, not mentioning Meng Hao's name or his status in the sect. "Meng Hao, that name sounds familiar." "I remember," said one of the women with a laugh. "He's the only remaining member of the Reliance Inner Sect. He looks a lot like the drawing." The eyes of all the onlookers suddenly began to shine. 2 people dashed ahead to block Meng Hao's path. In recent days in the cultivation world of the state of Zhao, rumors of a shocking matter had been circulating. The Reliance sect had disbanded, but Patriarch Reliance wasn't dead. He had put on a display of power all for the sake of a single inner sect disciple. He had frightened the most powerful experts of the state of Zhao, causing a huge sensation. After the experts had returned from the scene, these rumors had spread across the entire cultivation world of the state of Zhao. Even more hotly discussed was how Patriarch Reliance had given his inner sect disciple a precious treasure, something powerful enough to shake the heavens and earth and kill any cultivator. These rumors spread widely, and inquiries of former Reliance sect disciples soon revealed the name, Meng Hao. If things had just ended in this fashion, then the matter would soon have come to rest. However, after returning from the Reliance sect, the state of Zhao experts gradually realized something. Toward the end, it had seemed as if Patriarch Reliance's power had begun to wane slightly. Furthermore, considering Patriarch Reliance's famous temper, how could it be that they all were able to escape, without a single one of them being killed? Speculation naturally blossomed, and many people began to pay more and more attention to the inner sect disciple Meng Hao. The three great sects had issued orders that all disciples sent out of the sect pay close attention and attempt to find Meng Hao. His picture had been distributed along with the order. Now people weren't certain. Even if Patriarch Reliance was alive, was his cultivation base as powerful as before? Filled with misgivings, the three great sects had proclaimed that rewards would be given to any disciple who, upon encountering Meng Hao, could gather information about the treasure's power. Meng Hao stood there, looking coldly at the two people blocking his way. He heard footsteps behind him as four others blocked his retreat. His left and right paths also held people. He was completely surrounded. Inside the 100 Treasures Pavilion, Kaio Ling looked down with a frown. "May I help you, sirs and ladies?" said Meng Hao coolly, his gaze sweeping around. His expression seemed indifferent, as calm as still water. He seemed completely confident, yet also cautious. "No," said the extravagantly dressed young man with a smile, fanning himself. "We've just heard that Meng Hao has a gift bestowed upon him by Patriarch Reliance. Having run into you, we were hoping to take a look." Within his smile glinted icy coldness, yet his heart was cautious. Any treasured gift from Patriarch Reliance deserved caution. But these were disciples of the three great sects, which granted them extremely high status. Therefore, despite Meng Hao being at the 7th level of qi condensation, they still felt themselves above him. "That's right," said another surrounding him. He laughed. "Fellow Taoist, Meng does have the treasure. Why not take it out for us to see?" He clearly viewed Meng Hao as completely boxed in. Meng Hao looked as calm as ever, his eyes shining with cold light. His mouth twisted mockingly, and he suddenly slapped his bag of holding, causing people around him to dodge. Some pulled out magical items. A beam of light flashed, and Meng Hao's iron spear appeared in his hand. He stabbed it into the ground, imbuing it with spiritual energy so it appeared a mighty weapon. It hummed, the sound reverberating, causing surrounding people to unconsciously step back, their gazes fixed on it. "Whoever wishes to die can come up for a closer look," said Meng Hao coolly, taking 2 steps back and flicking his wide sleeve. He appeared supremely confident, especially his mocking eyes and smile, as if he knew beyond doubt that anyone who attempted to look closely at the spear would be killed by it. Actually, Meng Hao had taken 2 steps back to get closer to the city gate. As soon as surrounding people walked forward to look at the spear, he would attack, then take advantage of the chaos to flee. After all, this city was controlled by the three great sects, and he knew he could not get involved in any trouble here. Everything was quiet as the onlookers gazed at the iron spear. At first glance, it appeared beyond ordinary. It was covered with sweeping, decorative patterns, incredibly complex and dazzling. The more people looked, the more amazing it seemed. It glowed, its tip emitting beams of light that pierced like lightning. Even Kaio Ling in the 100 Treasures Pavilion couldn't help but gaze at it. More girls appeared around her, all staring down. After looking at it for a while, the several disciples from the great sects frowned. "It doesn't look like anything special. There are just some fancy markings on it. It doesn't seem to have any incantations on it at all." The fancy young man with the fan also frowned. "That's the treasure given to him by Patriarch Reliance." After examining it, he laughed, then beckoned Zhou Kai forward. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside the east gate, drawing the attention of surrounding cultivators. Meng Hao's eyes flashed, and he frowned. Clustered outside the east gate was a group of 10 or more cultivators in white robes. Some looked familiar, and he knew these were disciples from whatever great sect had been holding the trial. As he saw them enter through the east gate, he realized his path of escape was now blocked. His frown deepened, and his hand slowly lowered to his bag of holding. The fancy young man with the fan looked at the white-robed cultivators and his eyes gleamed. His face filled with reverence, he cupped his hands in salute and said, "Elder brothers from the Violet Fate sect, I'm humble Sun Hua one." Sun Hua's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Sun Ha. Sun is a common surname. Hua can mean many things in names, most likely magnificent or splendid, from the Winding Stream sect. Greetings, fellow Taoists. Hearing this, looks of awe appeared on the faces of surrounding cultivators. They followed the first man as he saluted the white-robed cultivators. They were famous figures from various sects, normally holding high position in the state of Zhao, but to meet disciples from a truly great sect from the southern domain instantly humbled them. Their expressions became ones of longing and courtesy. Recently, they had all received Jade slips from their respective sects, reminding them that if they ran into any white-robed disciples from the Violet Fate sect of the southern domain, they were not to provoke them. As the white-robed cultivators entered the city, they saw the state of Zhao disciples but completely ignored them. Hearing their identities caused a couple to frown. Their eyes swept the surroundings, then came to rest on the iron spear stuck in the ground. They stopped. Other disciples who were watching the scene looked astonished. Their excited eyes flickered to stare at the state of Zhao cultivators. Chapter 55, Overbearing. A dark look flashed through Meng Hao's eyes. He was surrounded by disciples of various sects from the state of Zhao, and the white-robed cultivators were approaching from the east gate. If he aroused the attention of the various eccentrics from the three sects within the city, then his chances of getting away would be very slim. When the state of Zhao disciples saw the Violet Fate sect disciples walking up, excited expressions lit their faces. To befriend them would increase their standing in their own sects and provide great advantages. Most had assumed the Violet Fate sect disciples would ignore them, but it turned out they really were approaching. Elder brother Sun is very well known. That must be why they're coming over. Yeah, he's a blood relative of one of the Winding Stream sect elders. His cultivation base is extraordinary. The Violet Fate sect disciples must be coming over to give him face. Ingratiating smiles appeared on the surrounding disciples' faces, especially the young man in expensive clothes. He was growing more excited. Hearing bystanders whisper, his heart filled with pride. He seemed well known enough to cause the Violet Fate sect disciples to walk over. This matter would surely be talked about, and his standing in the sect would change immediately. His name would be known throughout the state of Zhao cultivation world. It seemed to Meng Hao that what was happening was no big deal. He smiled, looking unconcerned. As the young man in expensive clothes moved forward to greet the white-robed cultivators, the state of Zhao disciples followed. The female disciples looked especially excited. Meng Hao's eyes flickered. He pulled the iron spear out of the ground and then turned to leave. Taoist brothers from the Violet Fate sect, I son, shall treat you to a feast in the Phoenix Heaven restaurant, said Sun Hua, with extreme excitement and pride. Fellow state of Zhao disciples, please join me in receiving the brothers from the Violet Fate sect. The cultivators behind him made the image even more distinct. His excited expression made clear that he was leading the state of Zhao disciples. As the words left his mouth and he bowed with clasped hands, the Violet Fate sect disciples walked past him without a glance. They passed the entire group without looking, hurrying forward. Sun Hua's mouth dropped open as he watched this happen, as did the other state of Zhao disciples who were following him. At the same time, the person in the lead position of the Violet Fate sect disciples let out a hearty laugh. Fellow Taoist, please stay, he said. Brother, did you just return from the treasure mountain? You have an outstanding demeanor. All of us who witnessed your actions on the mountain hold you in the highest regard. I am Caiyan Shuihen one. Caiyan Shuihen's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Caiyan Shuihen. Caiyan is a surname that also means 1000. Shuihen literally means watermark of the Violet Fate sect. Greetings, fellow Taoist. May I respectfully ask your esteemed name? Fellow Taoist, we've been looking for you, said another. We never imagined we would run into you here, ha ha ha. If you have time, I will send someone to arrange a banquet. I am Lu Song too. Lu Song's name in Chinese is Chinese letter Lu Song. Lu is a common surname. Song has no real meaning. It's the same Song as the Song dynasty of the Violet Fate sect. Please, allow me to treat you to a feast. Among the 10 or more Violet Fate sect disciples, these two had the highest cultivation bases at the 8th level of qi condensation. Faces filled with smiles, they hurried in front of Meng Hao, blocking his way. They spoke with utmost politeness, and when they approached, they saluted with clasped hands. When the state of Zhao disciples saw this, their faces filled with awe and veneration. An almost imperceptible frown appeared on Meng Hao's face, but quickly disappeared. He smiled and returned a polite salute. He mumbled his name unclearly, although he knew that even though he didn't say it clearly, these people could search him easily if they wanted to. The state of Zhao cultivators watched in disbelief. Their heads spun as they watched the Violet Fate sect disciples chat with Meng Hao in this way. This was especially true of Sun Hua, whose face went through a series of expressions. He was insulted and watched Meng Hao with disbelief. He knew that the white-robed cultivators were from the Violet Fate sect in the southern domain. They were proud and arrogant, considering themselves unmatched in the world. Yet they were incredibly polite to Meng Hao, and their eyes were filled with veneration. Though he wasn't quite sure what had just happened, cold sweat broke out on his forehead when he saw them being so polite. He realized that if he had made a move to test the spear, he would most likely have lost face. He wasn't the only one shocked. Zhou Kai looked on, dumbfounded. Originally, he had regretted calling out Meng Hao's name, but watching this unfold, his eyes filled with admiration. Elder brother Meng really did deserve to be an inner sect disciple. It's a good thing I gave him those spirit stones back then. The sect was dissolved, and we were kicked out like stray dogs, but he's still stirring up trouble. And somehow he's got disciples from one of the great sects of the southern domain treating him so well. Zhou Kai sighed inwardly. In the 100 Treasures Pavilion, Kaio Ling blinked a few times, watching in disbelief as the Violet Fate sect disciples surrounded Meng Hao. When she saw him speaking calmly with them, she couldn't forget what had happened moments ago. Her interest in him was piqued even more. "Elder brother Meng," said Xianxia, shifting to the spear in Meng Hao's hand. "Is this the treasured holy spear you used to rebuke the demonic beasts on the treasure mountain?" He had looked the spear over, but it didn't seem to have any extraordinary qualities. Yet he clearly remembered how Meng Hao had wielded it to bloody so many demonic beasts. "Of course it is," said Lu Song, laughing. "Your actions on the mountain that day left me in complete veneration of you. Elder brother Meng, there's no reason to deny it." A strange look appeared in Meng Hao's eyes for a moment. He smiled and nodded. "Yes, this is the spear I used that day on the mountain," he said candidly. "This spear can only be called a great treasure," said Lu Song. "I saw you use it to injure many demonic beasts. Countless, in fact. Elder brother Ming's mighty actions have replayed in my mind constantly." He glanced at the spear, his eyes burning. Then he looked coldly at Xianxia, and the two locked gazes. They clearly didn't like each other, and both knew the other was determined to come out on top. When the state of Zhao cultivators heard all of this, their gazes were drawn to the iron spear. Their original intention had been to examine Meng Hao's treasure. Now they didn't need to. If the Violet Fate sect disciples were convinced of its power, then it must be true. Sun Hua's eyes gleamed, and he walked forward staring at the iron spear. "Although I do have to say," laughed Lu Song with a shake of his head, "Elder brother Meng, you really threw our trial into chaos. You took so many medicinal pills, spirit stones, and magical items from the treasure mountain." From his expression, he didn't seem to mind. "Oh that," Meng Hao laughed, taking a few steps back. "It's no matter," said Xianxia, taking a few steps forward, eyes on the spear. "That treasure mountain belongs to eccentric Song," and he shot his mouth off, saying anyone with the skills could take whatever they want. "Actually, Elder brother Meng's actions left me immensely satisfied. But, Elder brother Meng, regarding this spear, would you be willing to offer it up for sale? The Violet Fate sect would be willing to offer a fair price for it." Because Meng Hao held it in his hand, Xianxia had no way to thoroughly inspect it. Because he was not at the foundation establishment stage, he didn't have spiritual sense, and therefore no way to sense the minute details. Well, Meng Hao looked hesitant. "Elder brother Meng," said Lu Song, his eyes glittering, "this spear is really very important to us. Please allow yourself to part with it." He knew the first objective was to force Meng Hao into agreeing. Then he and Xianxia would have to battle it out. He took a step forward as he spoke, overbearing power filling his eyes. "Eccentric Song treats people wickedly and mercilessly. You took many of his most prized treasures. If our Violet Fate sect's Elder Wu hadn't held him back, Elder brother Meng would be in quite a bit of danger right now." Xianxia advanced further, his bearing extremely overbearing. At this point, he made no effort to conceal his power as he spoke. The other Violet Fate sect disciples slowly moved forward, forming a circle around them. Their eyes gleamed with the desire to lay hands on the spear. "This spear is just an ordinary item," said Meng Hao, looking around at the circle of people, then turning back to Lu Song and Xianxia with a frown. Elder brother Meng, there's no need for jokes, said Lu Song with a laugh, his eyes moving over the spear's haft. I know I'm not mistaken. This is the spear you used. That notch in the side, I saw it clearly that day. Meng Hao stared blankly. It seemed this person had looked at the spear even more closely than he had. He hadn't noticed any notch before, but now that he looked, sure enough, there it was. When Lu Song saw his expression, it only served to deepen his certainty. Though he wore a smile, his eyes were cold. He wasn't allowed to kill Meng Hao to earn a spot in the inner sect, but could use other means, and he wouldn't hold back. Even if it's only an ordinary object, we still wish to buy it, said Xianxia threateningly, his voice colder than before. We are determined to have this spear. Please, elder brother Meng, don't make things difficult for us, otherwise we will be very displeased and you will be too. You might have the spear in hand, but the Violet Fate sect is one of the 5 great sects of the southern domain. Even this far away, our power is greater than you can imagine. Furthermore, it's not we who want the spear, but rather sect Elder Wu. Hearing this, the state of Zhao cultivators exchanged glances. Sneers appeared on their faces toward Meng Hao, but they maintained their silence. Sun Hua's smile was especially wide. Gaining help from these people to get information about the spear was a good thing. Regardless of the outcome, he should be able to take advantage of the situation. Furthermore, despite Meng Hao having a treasured spear, he wouldn't dare to offend a great sect from the southern domain. If I don't agree, will you force me? Asked Meng Hao, his gaze growing grim. Our sect doesn't steal treasures from people, said Lu Song with a laugh. But elder brother Meng should think things through carefully. What good will it do you to offend us? Furthermore, if we really wanted to steal the spear, we could get other people to do it for us. He glanced over at the state of Zhao disciples and nodded. Sun Hua and the others suddenly looked very excited. Elder brother Meng, I very much admire your performance on the treasure mountain, but let's not beat around the bush. Whether or not you want to sell the spear, you will. His eyes were grim, his words cold. Meng Hao's heart groaned. If these people wanted to bring trouble upon themselves, he wouldn't stop them. Various expressions crossed his face and he retreated a few more steps, muttering to himself. Then, gritting his teeth, he lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot. Esteemed Violet Fate sect disciples, if you truly wish to purchase my spear, please name your price. Meng Hao flicked his sleeve, stabbing the spear into the ground. His face seemed grim and filled with pain. Chapter 56, Elder Brother Meng, whether or not you want to trade, you will. When Meng Hao spoke, everything went quiet. Everyone's eyes focused on the iron spear sticking out of the ground. Xianxia laughed loudly, cupping hands in salute to Meng Hao. So Elder Brother Meng is willing to part with his treasure. I will not allow you to suffer a loss. He pulled out a bag of holding and tossed it to the ground. Here are 500 spirit stones. Clinking sounds rang out as 500 spirit stones appeared, a small mountain. The state of Zhao disciples watched, gloating over Meng Hao's misfortune. 500 spirit stones was not a small amount, but also not a very large amount. If he sold a treasured item for that, he would become a laughingstock. Meng Hao frowned, but his thinking differed from the disciples. In his estimation, the iron spear was worth 2 pieces of silver. To trade it for 500 spirit stones meant he was actually making a tidy profit. Are you kidding me? Said Lu Song. Don't try to bully elder brother Meng. You think you can buy a treasure like that with just 500 spirit stones? I will buy it for 1,500 spirit stones. With a cold harumph in the flick of a sleeve, he produced a bag of holding. More clinking sounds rang out as 1,500 shining spirit stones emerged, piling higher than Xianxia's. It was a grand sight that left everyone nervous with anticipation. The state of Zhao disciples' hearts pounded. To them, 1,500 spirit stones was a lot. Even though they were disciples of the 3 great sects, it would be difficult to accumulate so many. They panted as they watched. Even Sun Hua quivered with eagerness. Zhou Kai stood behind him, dumbfounded. His admiration for Meng Hao grew stronger, and he regretted calling out Meng Hao's name. He sighed, realizing it was his fault that Meng Hao was forced to sell his treasure. Junior brother Song really does have gall, said Xianxia, giving Lu Song a cold look. He was determined to win the treasure. As far as he was concerned, it was his ticket into the inner sect, and he would not give up, no matter what price he had to pay. As of now, his true opponent was Lu Song. The two of them could clearly not discuss acquiring the spear together. All of you, give me your spirit stones, said Xianxia, turning to looking at the 5 or 6 disciples behind him. When we return to the sect, I will find a way to repay you. Without hesitation, they opened their bags of holding and produced all of their spirit stones. 2,100 spirit stones, Xianxia said coolly, looking as if he didn't care in the slightest. Elder brother Meng, these are all the items that I possess. He gave a cold look to Lu Song. Lu Song's face twisted. The 1,500 spirit stones he'd offered had been borrowed from the handful of fellow disciples behind him. Seeing how many Caiyan Shuyan had produced, as well as Meng Hao's apparent hesitation, he suddenly slapped his bag of holding. Elder brother Meng, I have no more spirit stones, but I have medicinal pills. A bottle appeared in his hand. Here are 3 heavenly water pills, suitable for any cultivator of the 8th level of qi condensation or lower. It is one of the best pills produced by the pill cultivation workshop of our Violet Fate sect. Each pill is worth 500 spirit stones. The burning look in the eyes of the State of Zhao disciples grew more intense. They knew how valuable heavenly water pills were. Sun Hua's breathing grew heavier. He had heard the elders of his sect speak of heavenly water pills, and knew that they were one of the 3 most effective types of pills within the southern domain for 8th level qi condensation cultivators. Even within the Violet Fate sect, prominent members of the outer sect would have a hard time getting their hands on one. Caiyan Shuyan frowned, his eyes fixed on Lu Song. Clenching his jaw, he slapped his bag of holding and produced his own pill bottle. I have no heavenly water pills, said Caiyan Shuyan dramatically, but seeing that elder brother Meng is of the 7th level of qi condensation, please accept these 7 earthly spirit pills. They were awarded to me for meritorious service within the sect. They are perfectly suited for the 7th level of qi condensation. I have some piddling earthly spirit pills too, said Lu Song with a cold laugh. He looked back at the disciples behind him. They gritted their teeth and produced their bags of holding, handing over 10 earthly spirit pills. They looked with reddened eyes at Caiyan Shuyan and his group. Elder brother Caiyan, look, said Meng Hao shyly. His heart beat rapidly. Caiyan Shuyan's face changed as he realized that his offerings didn't match up to Lu Song's, but this was his opportunity to enter the inner sect. He would not let it pass. Junior brother Lu, you are determined to have it out with me today, aren't you? Fine, his eyes flashing fiercely. He slapped his bag of holding and immediately a black beam shot out, transforming into a black spike. It glittered like lightning, producing multiple afterimages. The afterimages all came to rest on Caiyan Shuyan's hand, and everything grew quiet. It was pitch black with an indescribable sharpness. Elder brother Meng, this is a magical item bestowed upon me by the sect. It is called the Hellfighting Spike. Cold and dark, if it wounds an opponent, the wound will freeze over and intense coldness will enter their body. Caiyan Shuyan forced himself to ignore his heartache as he spoke. When the spike appeared, the faces of the disciples behind Caiyan Shuyan filled with envy. Lu Song's expression changed, distressed. He had never imagined Caiyan Shuyan would take out the black spike. Meng Hao's eyes widened, his heart racing. A buzz of conversation arose among the nearby State of Zhao disciples. That's a hellfighting spike from the Violet Fate sect. I've heard the elders speak of it. Only the Violet Fate sect possesses them. It's said there are 108 in existence. Each one is shockingly powerful. Sun Hua's mouth grew dry as he stared at the spike. He wished he could be Meng Hao, then he could have this treasure. Lu Song's face twisted. Grinding his teeth, he thought of the chance to join the inner sect with only one spot available. He would not retreat. Enduring his disappointment, he slapped his bag of holding and produced a treasure. It was a feather fan, composed of 16 multicolored feathers. As soon as it appeared, it emanated shocking spiritual power that struck fear into the onlookers. Elder brother Meng, this is my most valuable treasure. It is a Milky Way fan. You don't need to practice with it at all, you can use it immediately. It allows the user to soar and change size. The 16 feathers can fly out and attack or circle around you to form a shield. It can be used in both attack and defense. It is not a treasure of our sect, but something I acquired by luck. Allow me to present it to you in trade, fellow Taoist. An unsightly expression filled his face, and his heart bled, but in contending with Caiyan Shuyan for the inner sect, he charged forth without hesitation. When the fan appeared, Caiyan Shuyan's expression changed. He took 2 steps back, his eyes filling with blood. He knew this was an extremely valuable treasure. To offer it was almost risking one's life. The State of Zhao disciples looked shocked, their heads humming. They might not be familiar with the fan, but it was obviously a spectacularly extraordinary item. It emitted fierce spiritual power that left their hearts pounding. Sun Hua's eyes widened, his body trembling with fierce envy. Meng Hao took a deep breath, apprehensive rather than happy. He had already offended eccentric Song, and the thought of offending the Violet Fate sect caused a cold sweat to break out over his body. But whether he wanted to trade or not, he would have to. His appearance, his frown, and the dark look in his eyes made the onlookers think he didn't view the treasures as valuable enough to trade. Elder brother Meng, I also have a plateau charging pill, useful at the 9th level of qi condensation. Ignoring the pain in his heart, Qian Shuihan slapped his bag of holding and produced a pill bottle. It is very precious. Any cultivator of the 9th level would go crazy upon seeing one. Even though it can't compare to a foundation establishment pill, it's still valuable. As he spoke, he didn't even look at Meng Hao but at Lu Song. This spear. Meng Hao felt even more conflicted and was about to speak when suddenly Lu Song raised his head and laughed loudly. He lifted his hand and pulled a brocaded pouch from his robe. He turned it over and a thick, round pill fell out. It was black with no spiritual power. Yet seeing how Lu Song treated it with utmost care, it was obviously some sort of treasure. Elder brother Meng, this pill is not reusable. It is a rare magical pill. When you crush it, it will turn into a hyper-toxic black scorpion that can injure a cultivator of the 9th level of qi condensation, perhaps even kill him. This magical pill was bestowed upon me by my clan. Here, take it. Lu Song's eyes were red, fixed not on Meng Hao but on Qian Shuihan. He held the magical pill up in trade, but was actually using it to threaten Qian Shuihan, as if this were the tiebreaker. Qian Shuihan's expression changed, his eyes flashing with killing intent. But he quickly got himself under control and then casually said, "Perhaps we should both trade for the treasure, then take it back to Elder Wu and let him decide what to do." Lu Song didn't respond. He didn't actually want to attack. If it were in a remote place where no one could see, perhaps he would. But with so many people watching, things were complicated. He had only wanted to threaten Qian Shuihan. Upon hearing the suggestion, he nodded. Even though it hurt, when he looked at the plateau charging pill in Qian Shuihan's hand, he could only clench his jaw and put his magical pill down. Seeing this, Qian Shuihan relaxed. Without asking Meng Hao, he grabbed the iron spear and sped off. Lu Song went with him, also holding the spear. They shot toward the city gate, eyeing each other suspiciously. The other Violet Fate sect disciples immediately charged after them, instantly disappearing through the city gate and off into the distance. They appeared to be heading in the direction of the State Shield mountain chain. Without hesitation, Meng Hao flicked his sleeve, collecting all the various objects. Then he turned and sped off. The eyes of the State of Zhao disciples glittered, especially Sun Hua's. Fervor filled his eyes as he moved to pursue and attack Meng Hao. But Meng Hao waved his right hand and the fan flew to land beneath his feet. His speed increased and he shot into the distance. At the same time, the middle-aged man sitting next to the pill furnace in the 100 Treasures Pavilion cracked open his eyes. They flashed like lightning as he watched Meng Hao disappear. "These Violet Fate sect disciples get worse and worse with each generation," he said coolly. "They are idiots. Even though they don't have the spiritual sense of the foundation establishment stage, they should still be able to tell that thing is useless." Upon hearing this, Kaio Ling and the other girls, who had just watched everything happen, looked incredulous. "It's just an iron spear," the man said quietly. "That young member of the junior generation, surnamed Meng, he said it himself." He closed his eyes again. This chapter was sponsored by Tejandra Johans, Deep Bhattacharya, and Ngan Nguyen. Chapter 57, Was It Worth It? Meng Hao felt quite conflicted. He stood on the treasured fan he had just acquired, using as much spiritual power as he could muster to flee at top speed. He feared being even slightly slow would result in attack and robbery. "First I offended eccentric Song," sighed Meng Hao, "and then the Violet Fate sect. But it's not my fault, they forced me to trade." In his mind he was innocent. At the time he had no choice but to trade the spear. Sighing, he pushed himself faster, getting closer to the State Shield mountain range. "I need to find a place to hide for a while. If someone catches up, I'll be in great danger." Meng Hao frowned. The power of the treasured fan faded and he dropped to the ground, tucking the fan away and running. "When will I reach Foundation Establishment? Then I can really fly." 2 days passed, during which Meng Hao didn't rest at all. He just kept running, thinking about how he hadn't rested since Shang Yuanziu chased him on Mount Daqing. But he had no choice. The thought of what would happen otherwise was too ghastly to contemplate. Meanwhile, deep in the State Shield mountain chain, atop the plateau next to the Treasure Mountain, Wu Dinkyu held up a go piece, smiling broadly. After thinking for over an hour, he slowly put the piece onto the board. Eccentric Song's face was like iron. With a cold snort, he slammed a piece down. "Eccentric Song, your cultivation base is so refined. You shouldn't allow yourself such a mood." Wu Dinkyu stroked his beard and laughed, calm as a cool wind. "Cultivators of our generation should settle our qi and calm our minds. Even with mountains crumbling, our expressions shouldn't change. But look at you. Are you really so ill at ease because of some nobody from the junior generation? If our positions were switched, you would be the same, said eccentric Song sourly. Absolutely not. If I, Wu, were in this position, I would only offer praise and certainly not feel anger. In the Violet Fate sect, we cultivate our disposition and would not allow something like this to arouse our anger. No offense, eccentric Song, but you really have something to learn from the Violet Fate sect in this type of cultivation. Wu Dinkyu laughed, obviously quite pleased with himself. How about this? He continued. After we finish this game of Go, you can come with me to the Violet Fate sect. I will allow you to peruse our moral cultivation manual, and then you will understand what it means to settle the qi and calm the mind. Wu Dinkyu's smile was so wide that wrinkles appeared on his face. Eccentric Song harumphed, refusing to respond and simply looking off into the distance. Wu Dinkyu's smile grew stronger, and he too looked off into the distance. Shortly, two figures raced toward them through the forest. It was Xianxia and Lu Song. They gripped an iron spear between them as they made for the plateau, followed by other Violet Fate sect disciples. Xianxia and Lu Song stepped onto the plateau, and both began to speak at the same time. Greetings, Elder Wu. Disciple has accomplished the task. I have acquired the treasured item through trade. Greetings, Elder Wu. Fortunately, I have not failed in my mission. I was able to trade for the spear. Eccentric Song's face was grim as Wu Dinkyu's laughter rang out. Excellent, good job, you two, he laughed. I will promote both of you to the inner sect. You didn't cause any problems for that kid, did you? I am pleased to report that we made a fair trade, said Xianxia hastily. Next to him, Lu Song nodded fervently, excited. We didn't cause any problems for him. Eccentric Song, come, let's take a look at this treasured divine spear. Wu Dinkyu laughed. He flicked his sleeve and the iron spear flew toward him. The instant it touched his hand, Wu Dinkyu's expression changed. His eyes flashed as he examined the spear. Grim-faced eccentric Song also took a close look. His eyes began to shine. He stared open-mouthed, then suddenly smiled. Wu Dinkyu's expression grew increasingly unsightly. No matter how he looked at the spear, it was ordinary in nature. Refusing to believe it, he pointed the spear at a random demonic beast further down the mountain. The creature didn't even notice. His expression was unsightly to the extreme. He slowly raised his head, looking coldly at Xianxia and Lu Song. When they saw Wu Dinkyu's eyes, their excitement faded and they began to tremble. Blank expressions filled their eyes. What did you trade for this spear? Asked Wu Dinkyu, each word deliberate. Looking nervous, Xianxia said, Disciple gave 2,000 spirit stones, 7 earthly spirit pills, 1 of the sect's hellfighting spikes, and a plateau charging pill. Wu Dinkyu's face grew dark. Next, Lu Song spoke. Disciple gave 1,500 spirit stones, 3 heavenly spirit pills, a treasured fan, and a magical pill. Eccentric Song burst out laughing, the laughter of release, as if all his pent-up depression from the past few days had suddenly vanished. Wu Dinkyu was mad enough, but when he heard the price the two disciples had paid, along with eccentric Song's laughter, his rage exploded. He suddenly let out a furious roar. Good-for-nothing fools! This iron spear is a fake. It echoed like thunder, shattering the Go board. Cracks appeared on the mountain's surface beneath his feet. Xianxia and Lu Song tumbled to the ground, blood spraying from their mouths. Their heads spun as Wu Dinkyu's single word echoed in their hearts. Fake, they were stunned. This word thundered in all directions with his roar, filling nearly half the state's Shield Mountain range and reaching Eastern Refinement City. It eventually reached Sun Hua's ears, filling him with confusion. After a moment, his expression changed and shock filled his face. The spear was a fake. He looked at his companions, and realization appeared on their faces as well. Could the iron spear have been a fake all along? Inside the 100 Treasures Pavilion, Kaio Ling was introducing a magical item to a cultivator when she heard the noise outside. Amazed, she thought back to Meng Hao's iron spear, and a strange look appeared on her face. Next to the pill furnace, the middle-aged man opened his eyes, which flickered with a mocking expression. Without a word, he closed them again. Far away from the plateau in the State Shield Mountains, Meng Hao lowered his head and ran faster. Eccentric song-splitting laughter undulated throughout the mountains. Wu Dinkyu's face couldn't look more horrible. He, an elder of the Violet Fate sect, had been hoodwinked by a chi condensation cultivator. Even though it didn't directly involve him, he would definitely lose face when word spread. He wanted to track Meng Hao down immediately. He turned to look at Xianxia and Lu Song, standing there terrified. He was disgusted, but in his heart he sighed. These disciples had spent all their days within the sect and had no experience dealing with outsiders. They were flowers raised indoors, inexperienced and incapable of dealing with schemes. With a cold harumph, he tossed the iron spear to the ground and took a few steps forward, casting his senses about for Meng Hao. But then, eccentric Song stepped forward to block his way, laughing complacently. "Fellow Taoist Wu, please don't lose your temper," he said. "Your violet fate sect stresses settling the qi and calming the mind, cultivating one's disposition. Don't allow a small matter like this to arouse your ire. When it comes to this type of cultivation, you should really research your sect's moral cultivation manual more carefully." Eccentric Song laughed heartily. Earlier, he had been prevented from leaving no matter what he said, so of course now he would do the same to Wu Dinkyu. Wu Dinkyu's face grew dark and he stared at eccentric Song, but he said nothing. "You broke the go board, so now we can't finish," said eccentric Song with a smile. "How about this? You were going to take me to your violet fate sect, right? Well, let's go. We can chat and play Go for a few months." The depression had faded completely from his heart. Seeing Wu Dinkyu like this made him incredibly happy. As for the treasures Meng Hao had taken, he didn't care anymore. What mattered most was the look of outrage and insult on Wu Dinkyu's face. He pulled at Wu Dinkyu, clearly unwilling to allow him to resist. Wu Dinkyu's heart filled with gloom. He glared at eccentric Song, then let out a long sigh. He knew the man wouldn't let him pursue Meng Hao. He stamped his foot angrily, then allowed eccentric Song to pull him up into the air. "You useless imbeciles won't be able to keep up," said Wu Dinkyu, looking down at trembling Xianxia and Lu Song. "The inner sect promotion is a failure. Return to the sect and immediately go into secluded meditation." The other disciples watched on, pale-faced. "Damn you, Meng Hao," said Lu Song, lowering his head, his face twisted with rage. "I will never forget this, you shameless bastard." He ground his teeth when he recalled Meng Hao's bashful expression, and it looked as if his eyes might erupt with flames. He had never met anyone so impudent. The spear was obviously a fake. Pain filled his face when he thought of how much he had paid for it. When he thought about the lost chance to enter the inner sect, he was so angry that he almost spat up blood. "Shameless, despicable," said Xianxia, thinking of his precious items. He picked up the iron spear. "Meng Hao, you are a complete scoundrel." As he thought of the inner sect promotion's failure, he really seemed about to go crazy. When he thought of all the medicinal pills and magical items, his hatred for Meng Hao reached the heavens. The two of them looked at each other, sharing a look of pain. "We will place this spear in the sect to remind us that we must kill Meng Hao." Fierce killing intent filled their eyes, and yet the trial by fire was over, and they were required to return to the sect. Their rancor and murderous thoughts could only be concealed in their hearts, never to be erased. Meanwhile, Meng Hao was both terrified and felt he was being accused wrongly. Sighing, he increased his speed, running as hard as he could for 7 days straight. Eventually, he found an immortal's cave in the deep mountains. Exhausted, he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. Was it worth it? He sighed to himself. He was tired from the days of running but had simply been too frightened of being caught. Now he was on his last legs. 2 days later at dawn, he opened his eyes and began running again. For half a month, he didn't dare let anyone see him. Finally, deep in the remote mountains, when he felt it was safe, he used a flying sword to carve out a cave and sealed himself inside to meditate. Chapter 58. This is not its world. 2 months passed. Meng Hao sat cross-legged in the immortal's cave in the deep mountains. Suddenly, a thunderous noise rang out, scattering nearby animals. The large stone slab he had sliced to seal the cave shattered. Stone fragments showered in all directions as Meng Hao emerged from the immortal's cave. His hair hung like a cloak around his scholar's robe. His eyes glittered like lightning, and a shocking aura emanated from him, along with a pleasant, fragrant aroma. Joy filled his face. After so long in secluded meditation, he let out a laugh that echoed and sent wild beasts running. "The 8th level of qi condensation," he said, fists clenched. His eyes shone even brighter had it been nighttime. The 2 months of meditation had begun with nervousness and imminent danger. Those feelings disappeared slowly as he practiced cultivation. He used over 10,000 spirit stones to duplicate medicinal pills for his meditation. He did not want to be in danger ever again. He needed to become strong to surpass the people who threatened him. "I need to become powerful. There is no other reason. I must become powerful." He stood outside the immortal's cave, breathing fresh mountain air, his eyes filled with resolve. He was a simple scholar, a student of Confucianism, but the past 3 years had made him more inwardly focused. After everything he had experienced, his personality was very different. His stubbornness was much more obvious. He had been stubborn in refusing to give up after failing the imperial examinations. He had been stubborn in his struggles in the Reliance sect. He had been stubborn standing up to Wang Tengfei, and now he was stubborn in his hopes for the future. Becoming powerful is much like becoming rich. It is a dream that requires no reason. If a reason is needed, perhaps it is fear of being poor or weak. That is what Meng Hao believed. Life is an ever-burning flame, filled with exuberance. In life, one must be strong and never lower one's head. He looked up at the sky, thinking of the Reliance sect. He thought of the arrogant conceit of experts from the state of Zhao. He thought of the coldness of those who had tried to kill him. He thought of the gaze of that middle-aged Tao protector standing next to Wang Tengfei that night. My mother and father disappeared when I was young. If I hadn't struggled to improve myself, I wouldn't have lived this long. I would have resigned myself to hopelessness. If I hadn't struggled to grow stronger in the Reliance sect, I would never have become a member of the inner sect. Stubborn insistence on self-improvement. That is my path into the future. He let out a long breath. Then he lifted his hand and flicked his sleeve. A black beam appeared and solidified into a black spike. Emanating a black glow, it shot toward a nearby boulder. A boom rang out and the boulder, over 18 meters tall, collapsed into chunks interspersed with pieces of black ice. They fell to the ground, emanating intense coldness. Satisfied, Meng Hao waved his hand and the black spike flew back to him. He moved his hand again, and a multicolored beam swirled around him. The 16-feathered fan appeared, flying back and forth as it followed his fingers. Suddenly, there was a bang as the feathers separated. 16 beams of light circled around. The 16 feathers became like flying swords, swift and fierce. They followed his hand movements, spinning rapidly around him, forming an impenetrable shield empowered by his spiritual power. Then the feathers reformed into a fan and settled onto his hand. It's too bad I didn't have enough spirit stones. The copper mirror really consumes them. Duplicating one earthly spirit pill required 100 spirit stones, not a bad price. The heavenly spirit pill, useful upon reaching the 8th level of chi condensation, required 500, a bit too expensive. Thinking about spirit stones, he frowned. Of the 10,000 spirit stones he'd had, not many were left. During the 2 months breaking through from the 7th to the 8th level, he had consumed over 80 earthly spirit pills. That was nearly 2 per day before he broke through to the 8th level of chi condensation. In the future, he muttered to himself, I will require even more spiritual power to practice cultivation. A glance inside his bag of holding confirmed he only had 5 heavenly spirit pills. He had already consumed one and calculated that reaching the 9th level of chi condensation required roughly 150. I know I need a lot of spiritual power, but could my excessive consumption of demonic cores have caused my body to reject medicinal pills? He hesitated, unsure how to confirm his theory. If he was right, he might need even more heavenly spirit pills, or perhaps other types. 150 heavenly spirit pills. That equals 70,000 spirit stones. Without them, it will take me a long time to accumulate that much spiritual energy. Plus, my latent talent is ordinary, so it will take even longer. He sighed at the emptiness of his bag of holding. He had 3 more of the extraordinarily large spirit stones, but he didn't dare use them. The more advanced he became, the more he realized how rash he had been to duplicate the wooden sword. The large spirit stones were clearly extraordinarily special, otherwise he would not have been able to duplicate the vorpal jade blood crystals. I won't use these large spirit stones unless absolutely necessary, he said resolutely. Maybe they will have some use in the future. The fan beneath his feet began to shine brightly, and his body transformed into a ray of light that shot into the distance. He traveled quietly, circulating his spiritual energy. Eventually, the treasured fan began to fade and take on a more ordinary appearance. As he moved farther away, he grew more at ease. After all these months, the Violet Fate Sect disciples will surely have moved on. He traveled carefully, eventually emerging from the mountains. He looked off into the distance. If he was right, this area was close to the capital city of the state of Zhao. Once he had yearned day and night to go to the capital city. This desire was second only to his dream of visiting the Great Tang in the eastern lands. He sighed as he thought of his 3 years of examinations and 3 years of failures. He had never even made it to the final examinations in the capital city. Another 3 years had passed, and now he finally arrived, not as a scholar, but as a cultivator. As he approached the capital city, he stopped gliding and began to walk along the public road. He tied up his hair and coupled with his scholar's robe, he looked just like the old scholar he used to be. Although he had then been somewhat short, after years of cultivation, he was now tall and slender. His skin was still a bit dark yet vigorous, emanating a strong air. He walked along absent-mindedly. It was March, a time for snowfall in the state of Zhao. As Meng Hao walked, evening darkness began to settle and snowflakes slowly fell. Soon the ground was covered with whiteness, like a feathered quilt. The wind blew snow onto Meng Hao's hair. It didn't melt, but rather collected. Everything was still and quiet. As he grew closer to the capital city, a horse-drawn carriage approached from behind, speeding forward. It seemed whoever was inside feared the city gates would close soon. It passed Meng Hao, kicking up billows of snowflakes. As it passed, the wind blew open the carriage's curtain just a crack, revealing a young scholar reading texts. Meng Hao looked at him calmly, recalling his own similar appearance years ago. Meng Hao was clearly about 20 years old, yet inside he felt much older. He let out a light sigh. Up ahead, the carriage stopped and the curtain lifted. The young scholar looked back at him, then stepped down from the carriage and saluted Meng Hao with clasped hands. "Brother, are you going to Capital City for the imperial examinations?" Meng Hao quickly returned the salute. "Years ago I dreamed of it, but those dreams have long faded. I just want to see the Tower of Tang." "That's a pity, my brother," he said, looking regretful. "Your bearing seems very refined. I thought perhaps we were fellow candidates. Are you sure you wish to give up on becoming an official?" The young man appeared about the same age as Meng Hao. Meng Hao shook his head silently. "Well, never mind," said the young scholar. He looked at Meng Hao's scholarly appearance and smiled warmly. "The snow is starting to fall harder and travel along the road will only become more difficult. If it gets too late, you won't be able to enter the city. Brother, why don't you join me in the carriage? We should still have time to make it to the city." Meng Hao looked up at the sky, then back at the scholar. He bowed respectfully, then stepped into the carriage. A fire crackled in a small oven, dispelling the bitter cold. Coupled with an old family retainer driving, it was clear the scholar came from a rich family. The old driver wore a wide bamboo hat and had large knuckles. It seemed he could do kung fu. "I am Zheng Yang," the scholar said with a smile, warming his hands. "Brother, there's no need to be shy. We're both scholars and scholars should help each other." "I am Meng Hao," he said with a humble smile. "Many thanks, Brother Zheng." His gaze fell on the book next to Zheng Yang. It was the Book of Rites. It looked very old and was obviously not a copy but an ancient original text. "You're surnamed Meng," said Zheng Yang, his expression brightening. Inside the somewhat cramped carriage, he still managed to stand and give Meng Hao a respectful salute. "Such an honorable family name. So you're a descendant of King Fu. I have been disrespectful. Please forgive me, Brother Meng." Meng Hao stood and returned the salute. "There's no need, Brother Zheng. It's just a surname. My ancestors were resplendent, but I failed repeatedly in the imperial examinations, which has left me extremely ashamed." The two of them sat back down. "Brother Meng, you spoke incorrectly just now," said Zheng Yang solemnly. "Your surname will bring you good fortune. It has been passed down from ancient times. As a descendant of King Fu, even if you didn't pass the imperial examinations, as long as you have kindness and virtue in your heart, you can still live by Confucius's values." Meng Hao thought silently, then lifted his head and looked at the scholar. "Brother Zheng," he said quietly, "what is the true meaning of Confucianism?" "Courtesy, benevolence, loyalty, and the golden mean," he responded unhesitatingly. "This is Confucianism." Meng Hao didn't respond. He looked out through the curtain at snowflakes filling the air. After a while, he spoke in a cool voice. "What is the meaning of life?" "Life," said Zheng Yang, looking surprised. He hesitated, not saying anything. The carriage grew quiet, filled only with falling snow drifting in through the window. Meng Hao lifted his hand and reached outside. Snowflakes gradually accumulated on his hand. "Snow will only appear during winter," he said quietly, "and can only exist in the cold wind. Therefore, its life exists only in the depths of winter." He pulled his hand back into the carriage and held it next to the copper oven. The snow began to melt, turning into water that flowed through the creases of his palm. "Snow can only live in winter. When it nears a fire, it dies. That is its life. It may yearn for summer but can only desire it. In my hand, the snow becomes water because this is not its world." He raised his hand and brushed the water off outside the window. There, beyond the young scholar's vision, it once again became snow. Zheng Yang stared mutely, a deep look appearing in his eyes. Eventually, the carriage entered the city. "Thank you for allowing me to accompany you, Brother Zheng," said Meng Hao coolly. I shall take my leave." He saluted politely and stepped out of the carriage, then walked across the snow-filled street. Yearning for summer, Zhang Yang murmured to himself, but only able to exist in winter's cold, only able to look off into the distance. That is snow. He watched Meng Hao disappear into the distance. After a while, he got out of the cart and gave a deep bow in Meng Hao's direction. Snow began to cover him, but he knew that as soon as he re-entered the carriage, it would die. He would never forget what had just happened, what he had seen and heard. Years later, after he became a famous Confucian in the state of Zhao, he would think back to that windy, winter night when snow slowly melted into water, and he would think of a scholar named Meng Hao. Chapter 59. Unable to see Chang'an. The state of Zhao was in the southern part of the southern domain, connected to the western subcontinent. These two areas were separated from the rest of South Heaven by the Milky Way Sea, though long ago the lands of South Heaven may not have been split this way. To be more clear, the state of Zhao exists on the southern domain's edge, far from the sea. Only by passing over numerous mountains would the boundless Milky Way Sea become visible. The state of Zhao was not very large, nor heavily populated. However, the capital city was a bustling place. Even though evening air was filled with falling snow, houses glowed with lantern light, keeping everyone warm inside. Anyone without a house, walking about in the snowy night, would feel indescribable loneliness. Meng Hao walked down the street beneath the darkening sky. The crowds normally visible during the day were nowhere to be seen. Anyone moving about wore wide bamboo hats and kept their heads lowered as they hurried along. Looking off into the distance, Meng Hao could just barely make out a large, prominent building. It was a pagoda, a tower. The Tower of Tang. It was nearly 300 meters tall, almost like a mountain, capable of capturing anyone's attention within the city. Snow surrounded it, but could not hide the evidence of devoted care spent by the king of Zhao, scholars, and many others who had constructed it. It faced the eastern lands, the great Tang and Chang'an. Meng Hao had never been to the capital city before, nor seen the Tower of Tang. But as he walked down the street toward it, he knew beyond doubt that this was definitely the Tower of Tang. He had always imagined that one day he would become a government official, and then climb to its top and stare out across the land. He looked at the Tower of Tang sitting there amidst swirling snow. A long time passed. Before mother and father disappeared, he murmured to himself, a violet wind blew outside. People said it was an auspicious sign, and that a celestial being had appeared in the sky. He walked forward, staring at the Tower of Tang. He thought about everything that had happened that night. He would never forget. That night he lost his youth. From that night on, he had no father and mother to rely on. That was when he began to grow strong. It was then he started dreaming of going to the eastern lands, the great Tang. Rumors spread that his parents were dead, but Meng Hao knew they were simply missing. They were out there somewhere. He would never forget the violet robe his father had been wearing as he stood next to the window, looking out at the violet wind. Nor would he forget how his father had looked back at him, a disturbed look in his eyes. He would never forget that night, nor the quiet sound of his mother weeping. He had never spoken of these things to anyone, but had kept them buried deep in his heart. As the Tower of Tang grew closer, he wondered why he was suddenly thinking about such things. He sighed. The sigh broke to pieces in the snowy wind. It would never leave the capital city, nor the state of Zhao, nor the southern domain. It would not cross the Milky Way Sea, nor would it reach Chang'an. Maybe it's because mother would always talk about the great Tang, he murmured. She told me that in the capital city of every nation, there is a Tower of Tang, and people say those towers are the closest you can get to Chang'an without actually being there. As he approached the district surrounding the Tower of Tang, he looked up. Snow fell in heavy sheets, and the winter wind whimpered around him. More snow was building up on the tower. From where he stood, he could see clearly that it had been constructed with great care. Its foundation was 8-sided, and it rose like a massive pagoda. It was constructed from green material and looked just as he had imagined. Despite the snow, soldiers patrolled around its perimeter. This area was a place only highly ranked officials and powerful people could enter to offer sacrifices and perform rites. But the mortal soldiers didn't notice as Meng Hao's body passed by and entered the tower. An ancient flight of stairs wound up inside, reaching slowly toward the top. The walls were carved with brightly colored frescoes depicting the eastern lands, the great Tang and Chang'an. I remember mother describing the great Tang to me. I was so small then that I didn't understand what she was talking about. But now the way she described the eastern lands, the great Tang and Chang'an, it was as if she had seen them with her own eyes. If she hadn't, How could she have described everything in such detail? It was just like these carvings. He examined them as he ascended. Eventually, he reached the tower's top and the end of the carvings. They had depicted life and culture, beautiful scenery, and countless amazing, legendary stories. It was all very moving and inspiring. Outside, snow whistled in the air, buffeted by strong winds. It lay thick on the tower's top. Meng Hao took a deep breath and looked off into the distance. The only thing he could see was snow. He could not see the eastern lands, nor the great Tang, nor Chang'an. "So you can't see Chang'an from here after all," he murmured quietly. He stood there quietly, wrapped in countless thoughts. He was not a government official here to offer sacrifices to the heavens. He was a cultivator, one of the 8th level of qi condensation. "I walk a different path than before, but the direction is the same." The wind blew his hair about, and snow stuck to him unmelting, as if it approved of his life, as if he too were snow. After a while, he sat down cross-legged and began to meditate. During the night, snow fell even harder. Lights shone within the capital city's houses. From atop the Tower of Tang, everything grew pitch black and quiet. Within the quiet darkness, Meng Hao could see himself years ago in Yunji County, amidst snow. The snowy night slowly passed. At dawn, Meng Hao opened his eyes. It was hard to say whether he glanced at the rising sun or the rising sun glanced at him. The city came to life with dawn. Soon, streets filled with throngs of people. Meng Hao watched the mortal world spread out before him. He observed silently until night fell. Another dawn broke, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. For 7 days, Meng Hao gazed down on everything. At first, his eyes seemed faint and weak, but then they grew bright and finally calm. Something had changed in his mind. He had achieved enlightenment regarding life itself. At dawn on the 8th day, he looked down to see officials and soldiers arrive at the Tower of Tang to perform a rite. A middle-aged man stood there wearing a golden robe. Behind him were crowds of people, standing neatly in formation. He offered sacrifices to heaven and earth, as did many commoners throughout the city. Meng Hao stood as they began to bow to the heavens. He left the tower, avoiding their obeisance. Stepping onto the treasured fan, he soared forward, knowing the time had come to leave. As he prepared to depart, he looked back toward the tower one more time. When he did, his eyes grew wide. He watched as the people kowtowed outside the Tower of Tang, which then began to glow softly. It was a sparkling glow mortals could not see, but someone filled with spiritual energy could. The light shot upwards, sending clouds roiling. A huge vortex appeared. This was also invisible to mortals, but not to Meng Hao. He could see the vortex clearly, and it caused him to suck in a breath. He looked shaken. Inside the vortex, he could see an endless field of bones and ruins, filled with a ghastly aura and curling black fog. He couldn't see very many clear details, but could sense a mysterious and gruesome air roiling out. His mind shook, especially when he noticed an enormous coffin within the black mist. There, amidst the ruins, sitting cross-legged next to the coffin, was a shriveled corpse. It suddenly opened its eyes. They were as gray as ash, and within them 7 faint spots of light rotated like stars. The corpse's vision shot out from the vortex straight onto Meng Hao. His heart trembled, and he involuntarily closed his eyes as he felt a stab of pain within them. It felt as if 7 stars were about to appear within his pupils, the same as those within the ash-gray eyes. Suddenly, withered wrinkles began appearing across his body, and a terrible black mist began to seep out of his pores. Shocked, Meng Hao retreated at top speed. At the same time, the vortex was sucked up into the clouds. The crushing feeling vanished, and everything went back to normal. It was as if what he had just seen had been a hallucination. And yet his body was still withered, and faint wisps of death aura continued to seep out. His facial expression changed several times. He looked down at the Tower of Tang. The glow was no longer present, but the people continued to pay obeisance. His face grew dark, and without hesitation he pushed the treasured fan to its limits. His body turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. He soared out of the capital city, looking back toward the Tower of Tang several times. His eyes scanned the sky, and doubt began to rise in his heart. It couldn't have been a hallucination. The Tower of Tang. What kind of place is it exactly? I thought it was a mortal place, but that's obviously not true. What was that place within the vortex? The ruins, the death aura, all those bones. His scalp grew numb as he thought about the corpse he had seen amidst the ruins. Its eyes had been filled with callousness, grim and ghastly, especially the 7 stars within its gray pupils. As he thought of this, his body grew cold and began to drip with sweat. And that coffin. Meng Hao took a deep breath, his eyes filled with fear. Who is inside that coffin, and why did it suddenly appear within the vortex? Why? Does it have something to do with the Tower of Tang? Does it have something to do with the Great Tang in the eastern lands? Meng Hao grew thoughtful, looking back at the Tower of Tang again. The sense of awe within him grew stronger. He breathed in deeply, gliding forward a bit before dropping to the ground and running. He was starting to think that being stared at by the corpse within the vortex had been a catastrophe. This chapter was sponsored by Mitchell Kutchuk, Tu Ha, and Hein Hodgeberg. Chapter 60, Undispellable Death Aura. The capital city drew further away. A long time passed, during which Meng Hao pushed down the feeling of fear that quivered in his heart. He frowned, scanning his body. It had withered. While before he had been somewhat slim, he was now somewhat emaciated. That problem was secondary to what really alarmed Meng Hao. His body continuously emanated strands of black mist as if burning. It continued coming out of him, no matter how much he tried to wave it away. It floated high into the air, making it possible for anyone to determine his location. My body stopped withering, but this weird black aura just won't stop. It's really making me stand out too much. He flew forward as fast as possible, trying to find a place to hide within the mountains. After the black mist finished dissipating, he would come out again. 2 hours later, he sat angrily in the remote mountains. After sealing himself in an immortal's cave, he discovered the black mist could pass through material objects. Damn it, how long will this mist last? He gnashed his teeth, not daring to stop anywhere. If he did, the mist would gather above him and become easily visible. Anyone who saw it would definitely think there was a treasured item nearby. Meng Hao frowned, pushing deeper into the mountains. He kept moving forward as fast as possible. When his spiritual energy ran out, he would consume a medicinal pill. It was only in this way that he could prevent the black aura from gathering. It wasn't as easy to see when spread thin, although it still floated visibly into the sky. 7 days passed. Meng Hao was frightened and exhausted, having had no chance to rest. The damnable mist was black during the day, then glowed white at night. After the 7th day, he could tell the amount of mist dissipating from his body had grown weaker. In his best estimation, it would take approximately 1 month to disperse completely. He didn't dare to stay in the mountains for too long, as he might attract attention. He wasn't sure whether the Violet Fate sect disciples had actually left, so he had no choice but to keep moving forward. On one particular day, he sat cross-legged on the treasured fan, soaring through a forest. Suddenly, he lifted his head, his eyes flickering. He could see 4 shapes speeding in his direction from a distance away. With a frown, he stopped flying and dropped to the ground. He slapped his bag of holding and a flying sword appeared. It shot toward an old tree, chopping a hole into which Meng Hao entered. He had attempted this method before and found the mist would not pass outside the tree. However, after about 10 breaths, the tree would wither. He had done this several times in the past week to avoid the detection of other cultivators. Sitting inside the tree hole, he waited for the 4 people to go away. Unfortunately, instead of passing by, they stopped nearby and began to look around carefully. One of them was a young man in a violet robe. His face was expressionless as he leaped to the top of a tree, the power of his cultivation base radiating out. In his hand he held a white pearl. The black aura emanating from Meng Hao was instantly sucked into the white pearl, whereupon it began to turn black. Meng Hao's heart began to thump when he saw this. The group was made up of 3 men and 1 woman. The woman wore a long skirt and was rather beautiful. A mysterious look gleamed in her eyes, a look that others might describe as demonic. "Come to think of it, this thick death aura has appeared a lot recently in the mountains," she said. The 2 men standing next to her frowned as they gazed around the forest. "Regardless of what's causing it, we should leave once we finish absorbing the aura," said one of the men, sounding a bit nervous. "Whatever is causing it is something very strange. It's probably better if we don't find out what it is." "What are you afraid of?" said the woman with a smile. She gave a charming look to the violet-robed young man, her eyes shining with charm. "With elder brother Yan here, we're safe from any danger. He's an inner sect disciple of the 8th level of Qi condensation. He can prevent any disasters, and who knows, maybe we might even have a bit of good fortune." The young man with the pearl was of the 8th level of Qi condensation and was obviously the leader. The others were all at the 6th level. It didn't take very long for the pearl to absorb all the black aura. The pearl itself was now pitch black and didn't seem as if it could absorb any more. Meng Hao sat there watching, lost in thought. "Let's go," said the man named Yan. He flicked his wide sleeve and the 4 of them began to make their way off. As this happened, Meng Hao frowned. They were taking too long and he had run out of time. The black aura was now beginning to seep out from the top of the tree. As soon as it appeared, the man named Yan turned and looked at it, his eyes flashing. Meng Hao sighed, then burst out from the tree. He flicked his sleeve and sped off as fast as possible. His appearance surprised the four people, as did the black aura emanating from him. The man named Yan stared at him. "Fellow Taoist, please stay behind a moment," he called out. His hands flashed in incantation signs, and instantly a black wind sprang up and formed into the shape of a hideous, grinning skull. It opened its jaw and shot toward Meng Hao. He had asked Meng Hao to stop, but this skull carried the full power of his 8th level of qi condensation. It moved as swift as lightning, with incredible power. At the same time, the two other men and the woman, their eyes glittering, attacked. Two flying swords and a jade bracelet transformed into beams of light that shot straight toward Meng Hao. The woman's jade bracelet let out a buzzing sound as it flew through the air, expanding in size as it prepared to smash him. Meng Hao frowned. He hadn't been in a good mood before, frustrated to the extreme by the black aura. At the moment, these people had aroused a strong killing spirit within him. He let out a cold snort. His right hand lifted up, and a roaring flame python appeared, 20 or 30 meters long. It shot toward the 4 incoming magical items, radiating blistering heat. A boom shook the air. The jade bracelet shattered and the 2 flying swords melted away. The skull dissipated from the collision. The flame python let out a wail and then vanished. 8th level of qi condensation, said the woman. The 2 men next to her gasped, their expressions intent. The cultivator surnamed Yan took a step forward, staring at Meng Hao. "I am Yan Ziguo, disciple of the Cold Wind sect," he said coolly, his eyes flashing like lightning. "Fellow Taoist, you don't need to be in such a hurry to leave. Could you please explain the thick death aura emanating from your body?" Meng Hao was at the 8th level of qi condensation, as was Yan Ziguo, so he spoke in a voice as cold as ever. Meng Hao returned his cold stare and said nothing. He slapped his bag of holding and in a flash, the treasured fan appeared. He shot away at high speed. Yan Ziguo looked at the fan in astonishment. "A magic item which grants flight. He's not a foundation establishment, so he can only glide. He'll be back on the ground shortly." Yan Ziguo's heart began to beat faster. The fan was a magical item that only disciples of the 9th level of qi condensation might get within his sect. With a cold harumph, he charged off in pursuit. The other 3 hesitated, then followed him. "Damn it," said Meng Hao, his eyes growing even colder. His opponent had seen the power of his cultivation base and his use of magic, both clearly warnings, and yet he still pursued. Meng Hao felt extremely annoyed. His hand moved in incantation patterns, then he pointed back at the 4 pursuers. Instantly, 4 beams of light shot out, 4 of the feathers from the fan. They cut through the air like flying swords, heading straight for the 4 people behind him. Yan Ziguo narrowed his eyes and smacked his bag of holding. A small wooden shield appeared, about the size of his palm. It quickly expanded to the size of a head as it flew forward to meet the feather. A violent boom sounded as they slammed into each other. As for the other 3, shock appeared on their faces and they scrambled to produce magical items. Amidst the ensuing explosions, they spat blood from their mouths and retreated, looking terrified. Those 3 feathers weren't damaged at all. Meng Hao waved his finger, and they shot back toward Yan Ziguo. Yan Ziguo's face twisted, and he opened his mouth with a howl. A green mist suddenly emitted from his pores, forming a dense fog that circulated around him, turning into a giant green skull. It flew directly toward the 3 incoming feathers. Banging sounds rang out and the skull collapsed. The 3 feathers no longer glowed and were now twisted and warped. They flew back to Meng Hao. "I'm warning you," said Meng Hao coldly, his eyes flashing, "if you keep pestering me." Without finishing his sentence, he turned and disappeared into the distance, his body transforming into a prismatic beam. Yan Ziguo didn't pursue. He glared at Meng Hao's retreating form, his hands trembling slightly within his sleeves. Meng Hao was a stranger to him, yet this stranger had just casually forced him to use a life-saving art. "That fan is not just a flight-bestowing treasure, but a powerful weapon," he said to himself, his heart pounding. He turned to look at his 3 bedraggled companions. "Have any of you heard of someone from the state of Zhao who is at the 8th level of qi condensation and has a treasured fan?" "Someone so young at the 8th level of qi condensation would surely have made a name for himself here," said one of the other Cold Wind sect disciples. "But I can't think of anyone among the 3 great sects who matches his description." "Who is he?" He can't be a cultivator from the state of Zhao, can he? Yan Ziguo frowned, even more interested in Meng Hao's treasured fan. Elder brother Yan, said the female disciple, sounding hesitant. I remember someone mentioned a treasured fan about a month ago. It was elder brother Sun Hua from the Winding Stream sect. He said that some disciples from the Southern Domain's Violet Fate sect made a trade with a Reliant sect disciple named Meng Hao. One of the items was a feather fan. Yan Ziguo looked shocked. He slapped his bag of holding, and a jade slip appeared in his hand. This was an item distributed to inner sect disciples. Inside was a depiction of Meng Hao, sealed with orders that anyone encountering him were to assess his strength. The orders were several months old, so Yan Ziguo had mostly forgotten them. Scanning the jade slip, he looked closely at the picture of Meng Hao's face, and sure enough, it was the same as the person he had just encountered. So it's him, said Yan Ziguo, his eyes gleaming. His mouth twisted into a cold smile. He was just about to say something when suddenly the ground trembled and the sky above turned crimson. Something shocking was happening not too far away in the southern domain, and the side effects were spreading to cover the entire area. Chapter 61. A shocking event in the southern domain. An earth-shaking boom rumbled from the heavens. The sound came from a great distance, billowing forth across the entire state of Zhao. Every cultivator within the nation heard the massive roar. A red glow appeared, so large it covered an impossible expanse. The entire sky burned crimson. No one knew what was happening. Far away from the state of Zhao and the eyes of its cultivators, in the middle of the southern domain, an enormous rift had appeared in the sky. It was a heavenly rift. The booming grew more intense, rolling across not just the state of Zhao but the entire southern domain. Every place, every sect, every clan in the massive southern domain eventually heard it. Meng Hao's face changed. Black aura roiled from his body at an accelerated rate. He shot forward faster, his body turning into an iridescent streak. Yan Ziguo and the others were awestruck. Their hearts raced, their cultivation bases suddenly unstable, as if about to fly from their bodies. Within the mountains of the state of Zhao, thick mist swirled around the Cold Wind sect, one of the three great sects. When the roaring boom sounded, the mist seethed and mountain peaks trembled. Hundreds of pale-faced disciples stared up in shock. On a mountain behind the sect, its two strongest members, both elders at the core formation stage, awoke and emerged from a secret chamber. They flew out, hovering in the air and gasping at the sky. Their cultivation bases rotated rapidly. Though they couldn't see what was happening so far away, they felt an enormous shattering pressure from the heavens. With their extraordinary cultivation bases, they sensed the heavens splitting. What happened? The noise comes from the center of the southern domain. Impossible. How can sound travel such an incredible distance? 5 of the Cold Wind sect's foundation establishment elders flew up behind them in succession, their faces pale and bodies trembling. Within another of the state of Zhao's 3 great sects, the Upright Evening sect, 2 eccentrics of the core formation stage and 4 foundation establishment elders floated in midair, gazing toward the distant heavens. The entire sky burned crimson. Seeing this left them in shock. What is this? The disciples of the Winding Stream sect also heard the sound and stared dumbly into the heavens. The sect's core formation eccentric trembled, his profound cultivation base unable to prevent his wondering stare into the distance. Amidst the burning screen covering the sky, countless fissures appeared. This is no normal sound. It wouldn't transmit so quickly otherwise. Its speed. This sound could exterminate everything. Far away in the southern domain, the patriarchs of the 5 great sects and 3 great clans felt the enormous pressure bearing down from the heavens. Being in the center, they could see what others could not. They saw the enormous rift in the sky. Disbelief covered their faces. The entire southern domain was in an uproar. Countless cultivators flew into the air as innumerable experts looked up in amazement. This strange sign shocked them to the core. Meng Hao flew as fast as he could, black aura pouring from him as if answering a summons. This, combined with the strange sign in the sky, terrified him. He shot forward at full speed until he reached the top of a tall mountain and gazed into the heavens. Far away, the heavens seemed to split slowly. A dark glow spread, filling heaven and earth with pitch-black darkness. A moment passed, then the entire southern domain quaked as if a powerful force shook its center, sending tremors rippling outward. Mountains crumbled and the land rocked. The southern domain was vast, so the effects took time to spread outward from the center. Mountains collapsed, but the state of Zhao was far away and only experienced minor earthquakes 7 days later. Even that shocked the eccentrics of the state of Zhao. Some had visited the central district and knew how incredibly far away it was. A massive earthquake there should not have traveled 7 days away to the state of Zhao. Within those 7 days, rumors spread like wildfire through the southern domain. Soon, everyone had heard the shocking tale. A corpse had fallen from the sky, and it had fallen roughly 500 kilometers from one of the 3 danger zones of the southern domain, the Rebirth Cave. The news caused a huge sensation in the southern domain and sent everyone into a commotion. It was even said that experts from the western desert were gathering in the southern domain because of it. Which expert did that corpse belong to? It fell from the heavens. Only those who achieve immortal ascension can enter the heavens. Could that roar have been emitted by the corpse before it died? Immortal ascension. Those words come easily, but ancient records claim only 7 or 8 in the southern domain ever achieved it. Yet that corpse, it was astonishing. When it struck the ground, it caused 7 days of earthquakes. Qi condensation, foundation establishment, core formation, nascent soul, spirit severing, Tao seeking, 7 stages to ascend to immortality. To achieve immortal ascension and conquer emptiness is difficult indeed. This news spread through the southern domain. However, the state of Zhao was a somewhat remote place, so the rumors didn't reach there. Only a few elders from the great sects learned of the information. Meng Hao continued through the deep mountains, frowning. During the 7 days, the death aura had reduced significantly, then began seeping out again. He estimated 20 more days for dissipation. This death aura is annoying. Without it, I could accomplish things. His mood was vexation itself. The inexplicable event 7 days ago had aroused all the cultivators in the state of Zhao, forcing him to hide constantly. He had been discovered several times and put in danger. Each time he had to extricate himself. He didn't like killing, but lately he felt killing intent more and more often. This won't do. If I kill someone, it will cause more problems. I should just hide. He thought for a moment, then suddenly looked up. Ahead in the multitudinous mountains, everything was quiet. He stopped and looked around but saw no reason for the peace. He had a bad feeling. He frowned, slapping his bag of holding to produce the treasured fan, then shot forward through the forest. A banging sound echoed, leaves rustling. Then everything was still again without trace of anything strange. Meng Hao's expression changed. 7 days ago's event had been shocking and things had calmed since. None of the wildlife had died. This boom should have sent the animals fleeing, yet everything was calm. Without hesitating, Meng Hao sent the treasured fan shooting forward in a different direction. Just then, a cold snort sounded. Black beams shot from several surrounding mountain peaks, connecting and enveloping the entire area like a seal. Meng Hao was within the ceiling area but toward the edge, not the center. Had he not been cautious and continued forward, he would have been smack in its middle. 8 figures appeared, bodies blurs. Soon they became visible. Meng Hao saw a strange, water-like shield that had hidden them. 8 people, 6 men and 2 women. One wore a long white dress, her face pale. She held an aqua-blue pearl that emitted water-like ripples, concealing them. The pearl was cracked, a single-use treasure. She stayed at a distance. The others approached at top speed, surrounding him. One was Yan Ziguo. Meng Hao's face grew dark as he looked coldly at the group. Killing air swirled around Yan Ziguo, but his cultivation base was not the highest. The highest belonged to someone floating in the air on a flying sword above Meng Hao, a middle-aged man in a sky-blue Taoist robe. His eyes were calm, his demeanor one of supreme condescension. His cultivation base was at the 9th level of Qi condensation. Among the sects of the state of Zhao, 9th level Qi condensation cultivators occupied a unique position. If they established their foundation within 60 years, they became sect elders. If not, they became honor guards. The middle-aged man had only been at the 9th level for about 2 years. His future was limitless. If he succeeded in establishing his foundation, he would gain a completely different identity. "You're clever," said Yan Ziguo coldly. "You wouldn't have swindled the Violet Fate sect otherwise, but you're not in the center, you're in the perimeter of this spell, and you're dead. Elder Brother Liu is here and we're taking the real treasure. Maybe we'll leave your corpse intact." He looked greedily at Meng Hao's treasured fan. He had learned about Meng Hao from Sun Hua, including his trade with the Violet sect disciples. Now he coveted Meng Hao's items. Meng Hao's face grim. He didn't look at Yan Ziguo. He stared at the 9th level Qi condensation cultivator. This was Elder Brother Liu. He looked ordinary and spoke little, just stood on his flying sword emanating power. When Meng Hao sensed his strength, his pupils constricted. "If you want Meng Hao's treasures," he said coldly, "you will pay the price." He slapped his bag of holding and silver light shot out. A glittering silver spear appeared in his hand. He planted it beside the treasured fan, its point straight up. As soon as the silver spear appeared, it caught everyone's attention. Even elder brother Liu's eyes flickered toward it. As their eyes fixed on the spear, Meng Hao flung open his scroll painting. Howling sounds poured forth, and 3 mist beasts appeared, charging toward the group. Taking advantage of the chaos, Meng Hao flashed an incantation pattern and a black beam shot at indescribable speed. Yan Ziguo's heart leapt. He ripped himself backward at the same time. Before he could move, the black light sank between his eyebrows. This was the hellfighting spike. This was Meng Hao's temperament. Not attacking was fine, but when attacking, strike first. Yan Ziguo sought death, so Meng Hao would send him to the underworld. This chapter was sponsored by Audiobook. Chapter 62. One wave settles down. As soon as the hellfighting spike touched the space between Yan Ziguo's eyebrows, black frost spread rapidly. In a blink, it covered his entire body. A cracking sound rang out. Yan Ziguo's eyes widened, his pupils shrinking. An astonished expression filled his face. Then his entire body shattered into chunks of black, frozen flesh that fell to the ground. Meng Hao had wanted to flee, but Yan Ziguo blocked his escape routes, so he chose to strike him down. He had been part of the cultivation world long enough to know the law of the jungle. Not attacking was fine, but when attacking, show no compassion, otherwise, death awaited you. Shock and horror appeared on the faces of the surrounding Cold Wind sect disciples. The 3 mist beasts from Meng Hao's scroll painting were almost upon them, howling savagely. Their appearance was fierce, their roars enveloping the area with powerful pressure. They looked like 3 conglomerations of black mist as they charged toward the cultivators and smashed into them. A boom resounded. Shock appeared on elder brother Liu's face. He slapped his hands together and waved them forward. A red banner flew out. It rippled in the air, causing a massive flame conflagration to shoot out over 30 meters in all directions toward the mist beasts. Meng Hao ignored the other monks in complete disorder. He charged straight toward the woman with the aqua blue pearl. He could tell it maintained the spell. Her face filled with anxiety and she retreated rapidly, but Meng Hao was faster. He was upon her in an instant, waving his hand to send her spinning. Blood sprayed from her mouth. Terrified, she released the pearl, which went flying. The woman might be beautiful, but her presence made her Meng Hao's enemy. He looked at her coldly, then raised his hand with a claw-like gesture. The pearl shot toward him and landed in his hand. As it touched him, a thunderous roar rang out. The 3 mist beasts were destroyed as elder brother Liu's flame conflagration encompassed them and spread toward Meng Hao. "You have many treasures," said elder brother Liu with an unsightly expression, "but you killed Cold Wind sect members. You're dead." His disciples looked to be in very poor condition, but that mattered little. He would have trouble explaining Yan Ziguo's death when he returned. He made no attempt to conceal his intention to murder Meng Hao. Meng Hao said nothing. As the flame conflagration descended, his left hand slapped his bag of holding and a large black net appeared. He flicked it out, shooting it skyward. It passed through the flames, extinguishing them instantly. The net expanded, growing larger and larger, shooting toward elder brother Liu. Elder brother Liu's face twisted. He lifted his right hand, which held a jade slip that he snapped. His body blurred as he just barely dodged the net. Behind, 2 disciples were caught. The net radiated intense heat, instantly setting their clothing aflame. Within a moment, their charred bodies were sliced into pieces. Horrifying shrieks rang out, causing the remaining disciples' faces to pale. They trembled with fear. Even elder brother Liu looked on with wide eyes. He would never have guessed Meng Hao had such magical items. Even while this happened, Meng Hao continued to move, grabbing the pearl with his right hand and smashing it. The sealing spell flickered and began to disperse. His left hand flickered in an incantation toward the treasured fan. He grabbed the silver spear as the fan's 16 feathers circulated around him to form a shield, then carried him forward toward the hole in the unraveling spell. "You want to run? Stop dreaming." Elder brother Liu jabbed his forehead. A sword aura emerged from his mouth, a small translucent flying sword the size of a pinky finger. A glittering sword aura billowed as it shot in pursuit. Meng Hao moved fast, about to escape. He waved his hand and the black net made loud, reverberating noise. The 2 cultivators caught in it were cut into pieces. The net rolled up, dragging their bags of holding as it flew back into Meng Hao's sleeve. Elder brother Liu's glowing crystalline sword had almost reached Meng Hao. It was about to stab into him when he sensed the danger. He could not stand against ninth-level chi condensation power. Seeing the sword's fierceness, his eyes flashed. The 16 feathers rolled together, becoming 16 swords that shot toward the crystalline sword. A thunderous boom rolled out. 8 feathers were destroyed and the crystalline sword spun. The remaining 8 feathers returned to form a fan beneath his feet. However, it was clearly slower than before. "With fewer feathers, your fan won't be fast enough," said elder brother Liu with a savage laugh. Yet even as he spoke, his eyes widened. Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding and 8 more identical feathers appeared. The treasured fan was whole again, and Meng Hao transformed into a blur of light, shooting into the distance. Damn it! Elder brother Liu's killing intent grew stronger. He raced off in pursuit. The remaining disciples had little choice but to follow, gnashing their teeth as they produced magical items and ran after him. Only the female disciple, whose cultivation base was not strong enough, hesitated and did not follow. Meng Hao stood on his fan, his face grim, death aura still emanating from his body. He took out the 2 bags of holding and looked them over. The magical items and medicinal pills were of little value to him, but he found 3 white pearls, items he definitely needed. He took one out and it instantly began absorbing the death aura. In about 10 breaths, it became completely black and unable to absorb more. Meng Hao frowned, looking at the pearl before dropping it. "I can't duplicate right now. Once I shake off these people, I'll make copies of the pearl. That will solve the death aura problem." He looked behind him. A glittering glow surrounded elder brother Liu as he soared after him. Behind him on the ground, 3 figures raced at breakneck speed. "Those 3 are nothing," Meng Hao muttered. "Killing them would be easy, but Liu is at 9th level chi condensation with many magical items. In our battle, he didn't even use magic. Fighting him directly wouldn't be good." A sneer appeared on his face. Even at the 9th level, Liu couldn't have as many medicinal pills as Meng Hao. He would just keep running until the other was exhausted. With his plan settled, he slapped his bag of holding and retrieved 3 earthly spirit pills, popping them into his mouth. He felt regret. "I wasted 8 duplicated feathers and now I'm wasting medicinal pills. If I keep fighting like this, I'll become poorer. I also forgot Yan Ziguo's bag of holding. I need to be more careful." He felt depressed. The pills infused into his body, filling him with boundless spiritual energy. His speed increased. Time passed and soon it was dusk. Meng Hao sped along at top speed the entire time, sometimes soaring on the treasure fan, sometimes racing on foot. Elder brother Liu was behind him the entire time, laughing grimly. Meng Hao was much more experienced now. Though flying sword gliding was not as fast as the treasured fan, he was completely at ease. Far behind, the 3 cold wind sect disciples moaned and groaned. They didn't dare give up, for fear of arousing elder brother Liu's displeasure. Meng Hao sped along as dusk fell. Suddenly, his expression grew intent. The death aura from his body was floating into the distance. His heart thumped. He looked off in that direction and suddenly saw a beam of prismatic light screaming through the air, followed by 10 or more figures racing on foot. The beam of light turned out to be 2 people, both about 25 or 26 years old, at the 8th level of chi condensation. Each stood on a green jade flute nearly 2 meters long, their eyes flashing like lightning. The one in a red robe was clearly just a step away from entering the 9th level. Among the people following on foot was Xianxia, carrying a pearl that was absorbing the death aura. "So you're still in the state of Zhao Meng Hao," said Xianxia with a loud laugh, staring greedily. "Elder brother Zhou, elder brother Su, this is Meng Hao. He has Patriarch Reliance's treasure. Even the Violet Fate sect wants it. He tricked them and they're furious. He definitely still has it." He palpitated with eagerness, having dreamed of getting his hands on it ever since witnessing what happened that day. He had run into elder sister Han of the Cold Wind sect a few days before. During an intimate moment, he'd coaxed information about Meng Hao from her. Then he found some elder brothers and used the death aura-absorbing pearl to track him down. When they appeared and caught sight of elder brother Liu chasing Meng Hao like thunder, their expressions changed in rapid succession. Sun Hua's eyes flickered and Zhou and Su let out cold snorts. They moved to block Meng Hao's way, fingers flashing in incantation patterns. The flutes beneath their feet emitted ghastly, shrieking sounds, accompanied by thin mist. The mist transformed into a gigantic hand that shot toward Meng Hao. "Beat it," said Meng Hao, his eyes flashing. He raised his right hand and a 20 or 30 meter long flame python appeared, radiating intense heat as it shot to meet the hand. He flicked his right sleeve and 2 wooden swords appeared. Glowing brightly, They became the fangs of the flame python as it surged forward. Chapter 63. Another wave rises up. A boom rolled out. The giant mist hand had been created by two 8th-level Qi condensation disciples. Meng Hao couldn't stand up to it directly alone. This was why he used the second most mysterious items in his bags of holding, the wooden swords. The first most mysterious item was, of course, the copper mirror. The wooden swords flew from Meng Hao's hand. They slashed through the giant mist hand and proceeded toward the two disciples. The swords didn't emit powerful sword auras, but as they flew, they sucked in surrounding spiritual energy in a roiling current. Shocked, the two disciples evaded immediately. Without so much as a snort, Meng Hao shot off into the distance. The wooden sword circled back. He didn't even look back, just increased his speed forward. Behind him, elder brother Liu's eyes narrowed, avarice growing stronger. This Meng character has way too many magical items. Those wooden swords are incredibly mysterious. It proves the spear the Violet Fate Sect sought is incredibly extraordinary. But why hasn't he used its power? He continued in pursuit. Like Meng Hao, he needed magical assistance to sustain flight. Sun Hua and the other disciples had dark looks on their faces. Zhou and Su were especially grim. With cold harumphs, they shot off in pursuit. Sun Hua clenched his jaw and followed. Zhou and Su transformed into multicolored streaks of light. They kept their distance from elder brother Liu but continued pursuing Meng Hao. Meng Hao's expression was grim. He knew elder brother Liu hadn't made a real move yet. With Sun Hua and others appearing, he now had two waves of cultivators to deal with. He frowned. I just don't have enough spirit stones, he thought. With enough, I could duplicate a heavenly spirit pill and break through to the 9th level. At the 9th level, these people wouldn't dare pursue me. It seems I might have to sell some treasures after all. He'd thought of using the copper mirror to duplicate magical items, then selling them. But the state of Zhao was small, with only a few sects. Selling magical items then using identical ones later would arouse suspicion. As he muttered to himself, conflicted, his eyes filled with determination. He dropped to the ground and began running, swallowing earthly spirit pills until his body was filled with spiritual power. Then he jumped back onto the treasured fan and shot onward. Unfortunately, there were many mountains but few demonic beasts. The ones he saw were weak, making his usual tactic impossible. As he tried to figure out what to do, Zhou and Su suddenly made incantation patterns. A whistling sound rang from the flutes beneath their feet. It sounded like a wailing spirit, circling around them as their fingers flickered. Heavenly Thunder Spirit. A fierce wind sprung up around Meng Hao and black clouds appeared in the air. Lightning crackled within the clouds, then shot toward him. Shock appeared on his face. This was his first time facing a lightning bolt attack like this. He stamped his foot on the treasured fan and 10 feathers flew up, overlapping. The lightning bolt slammed into them. A thunderous sound rolled out, sending the feathers spinning. The lightning bolt had been created by two Qi condensation cultivators. Though it lacked the power of heaven and earth, it was not weak and quite powerful to Meng Hao. His face drained of blood. He looked back, killing intent flickering in his eyes. The attack wasn't strong enough to make him spit blood, but his spiritual energy was unstable. An excellent heavenly thunder spirit, said elder brother Liu coolly, his eyes flashing. The winding stream sect's lightning magic is very refined. Sadly, your cultivation base isn't high enough. Even combined, the result is this. Were you stronger, he would be injured or dead. Despite this, he made no move on Meng Hao. Having fought with him already, he knew he had many magical items. He decided to rely on his profound cultivation base to exhaust his opponent, then attack. He was happy to see others attack him and force him to use spiritual power. We haven't finished the technique, said Su, the winding stream disciple. Don't shoot your mouth off, Liu Dayan. They exchanged a glance, each swallowed a pill, then began making incantation patterns in unison. The black cloud roiling after Meng Hao churned. Lightning formed again. A massive roar rumbled out and the treasured fan's feathers moved to defend. This time the lightning didn't end. Bolt after bolt struck, booming ceaselessly. 3 bolts struck in a blink, causing Meng Hao to spit up blood and killing intent to solidify in his eyes. He flicked his right sleeve and the scroll painting appeared. He poured spiritual power into it and 2 roars rang out. Mist seethed and 2 mist beasts sprang from it, shooting toward Zhou and Su. The 2 men grew pale. They had already consumed pills to perform their magical art, which was their only technique. Even combined, they could only sustain it so long. They were discussing this as the 4th lightning bolt struck and the mist beasts emerged. These mist beasts had the appearance of wolves. Heads twisting with fierce howls, they charged the two men, black ripples spreading from underneath their paws. Liu Dayan stared at Meng Hao with flashing eyes. He lifted his right hand, and at the exact moment Meng Hao unfurled the scroll painting and the lightning was about to fall, he bit his tongue and spit blood. His fingers flickered, causing the blood to circle his hand. His face began to glow red as he waved the finger at Meng Hao. Qi condensation, cold wind finger. The attack came without warning. The red blood became black and emitted intense coldness. In a blink, it transformed into a finger of ice crystal, then into a prismatic beam that shot directly toward Meng Hao. In an instant, it was within 9 meters. The finger attack was cunning and powerful. As it approached, the mist beasts collided with Zhou and Su. Above Meng Hao, the fourth lightning bolt began to descend. Meng Hao felt critical danger. A grim smile appeared on Liu Dayan's face as he advanced a pace. Beneath him, a glittering light appeared as his crystalline sword shot toward Meng Hao. "Let's see you dodge this time," he said, eyes flashing. "You can't. You must produce your silver spear and show its might. I'm looking forward to seeing it." Meng Hao's pupils constricted. There was no time for another magical item, so he released the scroll painting to float at his side. At this critical juncture, with no time to think, he stamped his right foot on the treasured fan. It instantly disassembled, the 16 feathers transforming into rain. 10 shot toward the crystalline sword, 6 remaining to defend against the lightning. To deal with the cold wind finger, Meng Hao dropped toward the ground and extended his right hand upward. A flame python 20 or 30 meters in length shot from his palm, rushing to intercept it. At the same time, his left hand flashed an incantation, then waved forward. A wind blade emerged, lending power to the flame python, which grew larger as it shot toward the cold wind finger. All this took time to describe but happened in a spark's instant. A massive boom rang as the lightning slammed into the 6 feathers. Weakened, it still hit Meng Hao, causing him to vomit blood. At the same time, the crystalline sword collided with the 10 feathers. Explosions rang as they shattered. The sword aura continued on, stabbing through Meng Hao. He coughed up more blood, his body trembling. Next was the most powerful attack, the cold wind finger. Once a lost art, it had been improved for 9th-level Qi condensation cultivators. A boom resounded. The cultivation-based disparity was immediately apparent. The flame python and wind blades combined might were torn to pieces, destroying about half the black cold wind finger. The rest continued through, stabbing into Meng Hao's chest. He coughed up more blood, which instantly turned black and congealed into chunks of ice. His body spun backward. Intense coldness filled his body as if he were about to freeze. He knew this was critical. His right hand shot out and the hell-fighting spike emerged, along with 2 banners that coiled around his body. Meng Hao was seriously injured but hadn't lost his will to fight back. He gritted his teeth and made to flee, but then something no one expected happened. Suddenly, a third party arrived. An arrow shot forth from the distance with a shrill, piercing scream. It flew directly toward Meng Hao, filled with intense killing intent, clearly meant to pierce his heart. It moved with incredible speed. He felt a stabbing pain and let out a roar. The 2 hovering banners moved to block the arrow. An explosion rang as they shattered. The arrow continued. Meng Hao waved his right hand, sending the hell-fighting spike he'd meant to counterattack with to intercept it. There was a boom and Meng Hao spit out more blood. The black spike disintegrated. The arrow slowed but continued toward him. He retreated, dropping toward the ground, but found no place to conceal himself. The few remaining feathers couldn't carry him off fast enough. Borrowing momentum from the hell-fighting spike's explosion, Meng Hao took a ragged breath. A fierce look appeared in his eyes as he smacked his bag of holding. A wooden sword appeared. He didn't have time to point it toward the arrow. It came so quickly it slammed into the side of the blade. Boom! Chapter 64. A massacre caused by a silver spear. When the wooden sword connected with the arrow, it emitted a droning sound. Pushed back by the arrow's force, it smacked into Meng Hao's forehead. Blood sprayed from his mouth as he spun backward. The arrow's power spent, it transformed into ash and drifted away. As Meng Hao flew backward, he slapped his bag of holding and produced a demonic core, swallowing it. He was running low on earthly spirit pills, so he opted for the demonic core. His eyes were shot with blood, his injuries severe, perhaps the worst since becoming a cultivator. Thankfully, the wooden sword hadn't been damaged. It was truly treasured. The reason Meng Hao was sent flying back was that his cultivation base wasn't high enough to control it. If it were, the arrow wouldn't have moved the sword back an inch. Meng Hao's body racked with pain, his mind a bit clouded, but his innate desire to survive remained. He bit his tongue and used the pain to focus. He lifted his pale, bloodless face and looked into the distance. A young man in a white robe was approaching on an enormous green leaf. His face was calm, his eyes cold, without trace of arrogance, yet a single look made clear his superiority. His cultivation base was at the 9th level of qi condensation, yet he appeared only 22 or 23 years old. Seeing him approach, Liu Daiyun narrowed his eyes. He instantly understood. At his age, he must be a chosen from a great sect, he thought. White robes. Meng Hao wiped the blood from his mouth, staring at the youth. I am Ding Xin from the Violet Fate sect, he said coolly. I'm here to take your life, on orders from the sect leader. He had been dispatched months ago to search for Meng Hao. Using his own methods, he had finally caught his trail today and had been watching, waiting to make his move. He was completely different from Xianxia and Lu Song. As an inner sect disciple, he was frequently sent out on sect business. He was one of the Violet Fate sect's chosen, destined to reach foundation establishment. Handling matters outside the sect was simply training for him. He was vastly more experienced than Xianxia and had made a name for himself in the southern domain in the past 2 years. His personality was cold, his attacks ruthless. In the southern domain, he considered his sect's reputation. Here in the state of Zhao, he could be less restrained. He had attacked when Meng Hao was in critical danger, and never imagined Meng Hao would survive the lethal arrow. Meng Hao's face was grim. 3 waves of attackers had appeared today. 2 were at the 8th level of qi condensation, 2 at the 9th. Based on his cultivation base alone, he couldn't stand up to them. He was seriously injured. The situation was very dangerous. Watching Ding Xin approach, Liu Daiyun's eyes flickered and he felt nervous, yet his eyes were determined. He would not give up. Zhou and Su seemed even more hesitant. If they only had Liu Daiyun to deal with, they could do it. But now that the Violet Fate sect had appeared, they were less convinced. Meng Hao's eyes glittered. His right hand slapped his bag of holding and 5 feathers flew out, combining with the 4 beneath his feet to make a 9-feathered fan. It took to flight, carrying him away at high speed. Ding Xin's eyes were calm. He flicked his sleeve and the giant leaf beneath his feet flashed as he shot off in pursuit. Liu Daiyun burst into motion as well. Zhou and Su gritted their teeth and joined the pursuit. Sun Hua wasn't fast enough and had been forced to drop to the ground. But he wasn't willing to give up, so he followed as fast as possible on foot. The 3 waves of people were incredibly fast, so Meng Hao swallowed another demonic core. The coldness within him was still very strong, and his body was covered with sword wounds that oozed blood. He clenched his jaw and circulated his spiritual power, then slapped his bag of holding. A silver light flashed in his hand. It was the silver spear. Liu Daiyun's vision immediately focused on it and he slowed down. Ding Xin, as well as Zhou and Su, had never laid eyes on the long silver spear. But Sun Hua, still running on the ground, had. He immediately shouted, "That's the silver spear. That's Patriarch Reliance's treasured gift." Hearing this, Zhou and Su slowed down, their eyes shining fiercely. "You are all after this silver spear," said Meng Hao. "Very well. It requires much spiritual power. Its true might can't be used unless you're at foundation establishment stage. If you're powerful enough, be my guest." His face twisted with incomparable pain as he threw everything away to save himself, tossing the spear as hard as he could. He put all the spiritual power he could muster into his arm as he flung it. The silver spear hummed, transforming into a silver-colored rainbow as it shot into the distance, shining so brightly it virtually forced everyone's eyes to follow it. The instant it flew off, Meng Hao's treasured fan transformed into a beam of light, shooting off in the opposite direction. Interestingly, the spear just happened to fly toward the 3 pursuing Cold Wind sect disciples. When they saw it flying toward them, they gaped in shock. Sun Hua's eyes were red, and with a hoarse shout, he changed directions and ran directly toward the silver spear. Killing intent billowed from his face as he slapped his bag of holding, and a sword aura emerged. He clearly intended to kill anyone who dared take the spear from him. Further behind, the 10 or more winding stream disciples raced forward even harder. Liu Daiyun's facial expression changed as he debated whether the spear was real. Not at foundation establishment stage, he lacked spiritual sense, so it was difficult to judge. There was a 50-50 chance, but it didn't matter to him. He couldn't let the winding stream disciples gang up on his fellow disciples. If they did and word got out, he would be severely punished when he returned. And if the spear was real, If he gave up, his punishment would be even more severe. He was damned if he did, damned if he didn't. He clenched his jaw. Damn it, he abandoned pursuit of Meng Hao and made a beeline for the spear. Zhou and Su hesitated, watching the long spear fly off, pursued by both Sun Hua and their fellow disciples. At first, they weren't sure if they should chase the spear, but when they saw Liu Dayan speed off, they made their decision and shot off in the same direction. Only Ding Xin stopped, his eyes flashing. His task was to slay Meng Hao, so he didn't care whether the treasure was real or fake. With a cold laugh, his eyes shining, he pushed his giant leaf into a beam of prismatic light, speeding after Meng Hao. Two people, one fleeing as fast as he could, the other pursuing with a magical item backed by 9th-level qi condensation power. They disappeared over the horizon. As for Liu Dayan, he flew quickly toward the silver spear and seemed about to reach it when someone howled from behind. Heavenly Thunder Spirit. A black cloud formed above Liu Dayan, and thunder crackled as a lightning bolt struck toward him. His face grew dark. He slapped his bag of holding and coldness spread out, shooting toward the lightning bolt. The lightning dissipated with a booming sound, and the coldness continued onward into the black thundercloud. It began to rumble as if about to break apart. Heavenly Thunder Spirit detonate. Normally, Zhou and Su would never do this, but with the silver spear in play and the winding stream disciples on the ground having the upper hand, they couldn't allow Liu Dayan to enter the fray. Now that they'd abandoned pursuit of Meng Hao, they could pour all their combined power into this. A massive explosion reverberated as the thundercloud exploded. The force shot out in all directions. Zhou and Su coughed up blood. Liu Dayan, also injured, was not in a good position. A crystalline glow appeared in front of him as blood seeped from the corners of his mouth. At this moment, the silver spear slammed into the ground. The cold wind disciples were about to grab it when Sun Hua arrived, a savage look on his face. Behind him swarmed the winding stream disciples, their faces radiating ferocity. "This treasure belongs to the winding stream sect," shouted Sun Hua excitedly. If he was the first to lay hands on it, it might not end up his, but the sect would reward him. Perhaps he'd have a breakthrough and reach the 8th level. The 3 cold wind disciples were just reaching for the spear when they were surrounded by the 10 or so others. They howled as the winding stream disciples attacked them. They could do little more than watch as the prize became theirs. "So brazen," shouted Liu Dayan, turning to see what was happening. His roar rumbled out as he completely ignored Zhou and Su. He waved his hand toward Sun Hua and the cold wind finger appeared, shooting forward as fast as lightning. Considering Sun Hua's cultivation base, he simply couldn't avoid it. His facial expression changed to one of savagery and he gritted his teeth. His only hope lay in the treasure. As the cold wind finger approached, he snatched up the long silver spear, brandishing it. "You're defeated," he shouted. Liu Dayan's eyes focused on the spear as it flew into the air. Zhou and Su held their breath. The silver spear flashed as it flew forward, making a beautiful arc. The instant it met the cold wind finger, a bang sounded. It wasn't very loud. The spear broke apart, most shattering into dust, only a few fragments remaining. Sun Hua gaped in astonishment, the last look he would ever give. The cold wind finger pierced into his chest. His body shuddered and a boom rang out, louder than the spear's as he exploded. Liu Dayan stared in shock, as did Zhou and Su. The cold wind sect and winding stream disciples were also dumbfounded. Everything was suddenly quiet, except for the sound reverberating from the attack that killed Sun Hua. Liu Dayan was the first to move again. He went forward and collected the remaining fragments. Zhou and Su also approached and picked up some. "Silver? It's really silver. It's just a damned silver spear." Liu Dayan's eyes were crimson as if he was about to go berserk. He raised his head to the sky and let out a ferocious roar. He was humiliated and furious. He had killed Sun Hua. Had the spear actually been treasured, it wouldn't be a huge problem. But he had killed a winding stream inner sect disciple over a simple silver spear. This could cause a conflagration between 2 great sects. Meng Hao, he wanted to chase after him, but Meng Hao had long since disappeared. Zhou and Su were also furious. While they felt indignation toward Meng Hao, Sun Hua had been killed by Liu Dayan. They couldn't just let him go. This chapter was sponsored by Hein Audiobook, Tommy Iskandar, and Morton Stakemare. Chapter 65, Battle at the North Sea. An iron spear had cheated the Violet Fate sect disciples. A silver spear had cheated Sun Hua and Liu Dayan, and caused friction between 2 great sects. If Fatty's father knew, his eyes would grow wide. The iron, silver, and gold spears were crafted by his artisans. If Fatty heard about it, he would find it incredibly amusing. Meng Hao hadn't even known how useful the silver spear would be. The people from the Winding Stream sect and the Cold Wind sect had already stopped chasing him. Even if they wanted to pursue him, they wouldn't be able to track him down. Yet his face was as grim as before. He stood on the treasured fan, popping down demonic cores. Ding Xin pursued him on his giant leaf, his face cold. To kill Meng Hao, he would follow him to the ends of the earth if necessary. If it was a simple pursuit, Meng Hao would lead him in circles with his vast demonic cores. But he was seriously injured, which made things difficult. The demonic cores barely kept him going. He could suppress the injury for a while, but eventually wouldn't be able to. When that happened, it would become more dangerous. Even more frustrating, occasional arrows screamed toward him from behind, forcing him to defend with the treasured fan. The most dangerous position was when he had to drop to the ground and run, decreasing his speed and agility. Thankfully, forests covered most of the land. By the time he reached the next mountain, he could jump onto the treasured fan again. Of course, Ding Xin was also incapable of sustained flight. Like Liu Daiyun, he had to drop to the ground occasionally, waiting for favorable terrain to glide again. "You can't get away," said Ding Xin with a smile, his eyes glittering. "If you give up, I can take you back to the sect and let them deal with you. There are special circumstances regarding the matter between myself and the Violet Fate sect," said Meng Hao as he sped forward. "Fellow Taoist Ding, do you understand?" "I don't need to," he responded coolly, his eyes growing colder. "If I take you back to the sect elders will surely punish you. The Violet Fate sect is one of the great sects of the southern domain. Naturally, they will be reasonable and discern what is true and false." "What happened that day was beyond my control," Meng Hao explained. "Qian Shuhan and Lu Song forced me to sell my item. I told them it was just an ordinary spear, but they insisted. They even threatened me. You can't blame me for that." Having reached a relatively high hill, he pulled out the treasured fan and began to glide again. "How could the fault not be yours?" said Ding Xin, his voice cold. He continued to move forward at great speed. "You could have broken the spear on the spot, then pulled out the real treasure. None of this would have happened." He slapped his bag of holding and a black wooden bow appeared. He pulled it back and released a screaming arrow. There was a boom as Meng Hao used a magical item to defend himself. Coughing up blood, he laughed. The blood on his teeth made his smile more ferocious. "This is your so-called being reasonable," he said. His eyes shone with killing intent. Swallowing a demonic core, he pushed the treasured fan forward even faster. Several hours passed. Afternoon came, then evening. Meng Hao was exhausted. He could see this pursuit might go on for days. From the cold eyes of his pursuer, it was clear he was being toyed with. He was prey not to be killed forthrightly, but toyed with. Then, as he went crazy from it all, he would be felled in a single blow. The land of the state of Zhao whizzed beneath them. Time passed. Meng Hao's 8th-level cultivation base seemed about to wither. He continually consumed demonic cores, but that harmed his body. Even his blood seemed to reek with demonic air. To a cultivator, this was essentially harming one's own cultivation base. Meng Hao had never heard of this, but based on what he saw, he now had a clue. Yet he had no choice. Ding Xin had noticed what was happening and intentionally slowed his pursuit. An inquisitive look appeared in his eyes, as if he'd caught sight of some interesting toy. "I really want to see what happens when you consume so many demonic cores that your entire aura becomes demonic. When I kill you, will I find an 8th-level demonic core inside?" Ding Xin laughed. Meng Hao heard the words and more veins of blood appeared in his eyes. His face grew somber. He was not the type to speak during a fight. He had tried to explain, only to find his opponent didn't care. After that, he said nothing. This was like facing Wang Tengfei. He hadn't roared or howled. He'd faced everything with dark silence. He continued to flee for some time, pushing himself to the limits of his speed. Finally, ahead, he caught sight of Mount Daqing. He had been hiding for about half a year and finally returned to the mountain, a big circle. As he continued, he could see a vast mirror-like lake in the distance. It was the North Sea. When he saw it, his eyes lit up. The North Sea. Meng Hao thought of the little ship, the old man and the young girl, and how the North Sea had revealed the Tao. His gaze grew hard and he changed direction, aiming for the lake. He sped along on his treasured fan. Behind him, Ding Xin sneered. He had quite enjoyed forcing his quarry to consume demonic cores. "I'm not sure why this guy has so many demonic cores, but it doesn't matter. I'll force him to tell me before he dies. I really want to see what his body looks like after eating too many." He smiled. stamping down on his giant leaf and continuing in pursuit. The two continued for a while, until suddenly a booming sound rang out. Just as they flew out over the North Sea, Meng Hao slapped his bag of holding and tossed out the black net. It grew to approximately 9 meters in diameter and shot toward Ding Xin. He immediately flicked his wide sleeve, and a violet-colored jade slip flew out, transforming into a violet whirlwind. The whirlwind sent the net spinning, and its connection with Meng Hao seemed severed as it flew off into the distance. "Using a useless treasure like that shows how incompetent you are," said Ding Xin coldly. The net appeared extraordinary, so he'd used the jade slip. He never imagined it would be defeated so easily. Meng Hao's eyes flashed. He bit down on his tongue and spit out blood. His face was even paler. As he moved across the North Sea, the water began to ripple as if a fierce wind were blowing. Its calmness was broken. The treasured fan stopped when he reached the center of the lake. It was the first time since Ding Xin began chasing him that he came to a full stop. He turned around, slapping his bag of holding, and the scroll painting appeared in his hands. His eyes glittered, emanating killing intent. He would flee no longer. He would fight with Ding Xin, cultivator of the 9th level of qi condensation. Meng Hao was not in the upper hand, but he would fight. He had to fight. He couldn't carry on much longer, so if he didn't fight, he would die. There was only one option: fight. "So you're not running anymore," said Ding Xin as he approached. A sneer appeared on his face when he saw the murder in Meng Hao's eyes. He waved his finger, and instantly a violet light appeared in front of him, transforming into a bird. It flapped its wings as it shot toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's eyes flashed. The instant the violet bird appeared, the scroll painting trembled and roaring beasts could be heard. Meng Hao went all in with his cultivation base. Because of the vast demonic power within his spiritual energy, the roars were particularly frightening. 4 streams of mist appeared, solidifying into 4 demonic beasts that charged toward the violet bird. At the same time, Meng Hao took a step forward. The treasured fan disassembled, the feathers circulating around him and then shooting toward Ding Xin like flying swords. Meng Hao didn't retreat. A flying sword appeared beneath his feet to support him as he shot toward Ding Xin. "You overestimate yourself," said Ding Xin with a cold laugh, his eyes filled with ridicule. His right hand flickered in incantation patterns, and then he pressed down on his forehead. A vortex emerged, accompanied by a roaring sound. Violet Fate Aura. Dense violet qi poured from the vortex, instantly transforming into a violet ring, which expanded and flew toward Meng Hao. Thunderous sounds reverberated, causing the feathers around Meng Hao to crumble. As the massive sound roared out, he vomited blood, yet stubbornness filled his eyes. He slapped his bag of holding, and roughly 100 flying swords emerged, shooting toward Ding Xin. The sword rain screamed forth, filling the sky with light. The swords reached Ding Xin in an instant, yet his sneer grew thicker. "So reckless," he said, slapping his bag of holding. A red beam emerged, transforming into a red whisk. He twirled it, and a screaming red gust of wind appeared, cracking the nearly 100 flying swords. Many shattered. The wind smacked into Meng Hao, and he coughed up more blood. But then, within the fragments of the 100 swords, appeared 2 wooden swords. They flew out, piercing through the red wind and shooting toward Ding Xin. Ding Xin's eyes narrowed. His fingers flashed in incantation signs as he shot backward. Meng Hao lifted his right hand into the air, his face radiating killing intent. His finger pointed up, and suddenly the black net, which had been spinning away, expanded to 30 meters, then dropped with incredible speed. All this happened in a moment. Ding Xin's expression changed instantaneously. Before he could react, the huge net caught him up. The 2 wooden swords shot toward him, and it seemed they would stab into his chest. It was a simple tactic Meng Hao had thought of on the spur of the moment. It wasn't perfect, but the best he could come up with. He had used the treasured fan's feathers and sacrificed the multitude of flying swords to catch his opponent off guard. It was designed to distract him, and it had worked. Chapter 66. A Great Kindness. Everything was all to give the wooden swords a chance at a kill. Ding Xin's eyes narrowed as a feeling of intense danger welled up in his heart. This was the first time he had experienced this feeling in the backwater state of Zhao. Even in the southern domain, he had never provoked the wrath of Foundation establishment cultivators. He'd only ever been in tousles with people of the same stage as himself. Astonished to be in such a perilous situation, he raised his right hand and pushed down on his forehead. An exploding sound rippled out, and a massive amount of violet qi poured forth from his head. It rapidly congealed into the figure of a person, his back facing Meng Hao. The vague figure was dressed in a violet robe. An explosive pressure burst out from it, and violet chi rolled out everywhere, causing the net to stop in place. Ding Zin's face paled as the massive net slowed to a halt. He immediately shot backward. The two wooden swords continued to shoot forward, passing through the violet cloud and speeding toward Ding Zin. Impossible! Ding Zin's scalp went numb, and his face filled with astonishment. How could he have imagined that Meng Hao's two wooden swords could defy the power of his life-saving magic? This life-saving magic was bestowed upon disciples of the 9th level of Qi condensation and was capable of resisting the complete power of a Foundation establishment cultivator. It could only be used once, and even after all these years, he had never employed its power. Finally, in the face of imminent peril, he had used it today. And yet, it couldn't stop the two wooden swords. What type of sword is this? The blood drained from Ding Zin's face. At such a critical moment, he didn't have time to think about it. He clenched his jaw and let out a mighty roar. He bit his tongue and spat out blood. This was blood from his cultivation base and was connected to his longevity. As soon as he spat it out, his cultivation base dropped a bit. It would take a significant amount of time in secluded meditation before it could recover. As he spat the blood, it transformed into a red mist that was drawn into the violet form emerging from his head. He let out a shout. Violet chi from the east. Immediately, the purple-robed figure turned around. Its face was blurry, but its eyes were clearly radiating a powerful violet glow. When the violet glow appeared, Meng Hao's body shook and pain washed over him like floodwaters. He retreated backward, blood spraying from his back. A roaring sound filled his body, and his consciousness began to waver. He floated backward like a kite with its string cut, then dropped down onto the surface of the North Sea. He slowly sank down into the water. At the same time, the two wooden swords started to shake. One of them turned violet, seemingly no longer under Meng Hao's control. It spun out of control, then fell down into the North Sea. But that was only one sword. Ding Zin had gone all out, reducing his own life expectancy and damaging his cultivation base to employ the full power of the life-saving art. But he had only been able to target one of the wooden swords. The second one, though it was shaking, continued onward. In an instant, it passed through everything to stab into Ding Zin's chest. Then, it seemed to lose the spiritual power which controlled it. It too fell down into the North Sea. The sword had stabbed Ding Zin, but not in through the heart. With the aid of the violet chi from the east, he was able to avoid being critically injured. Even still, he let out a miserable scream as blood showered out of his chest and mouth. His hair flew around wildly, and his white robe was soaked with blood. His eyes bloodshot, he covered the wound in his chest and let out a horrified howl. In all the battles he had fought from the beginning until now, he had never received a serious injury. Now here, in this backwater state of Zhao which he looked down on so much, he had been severely injured by a nobody cultivator who he had completely disregarded. Furthermore, he had been forced to use his life-saving method. His eyes were grim as he looked down at the North Sea. Your life has been taken by my violet chi from the east, but since you dared to injure me, I will drag up your corpse and hack it to pieces. Ding Zin's chest burned with pain. He had used blood from his cultivation base and had damaged his longevity. At this point, he had sunk to the 8th level of Qi condensation. His face was pale and filled with fury. He produced a medicinal pill and consumed it. And then, suddenly, his facial expression changed. He looked down at the wound in his chest, and his face was seized with terror. My spiritual power is being sucked out through the sword wound. This was something Ding Zin had never experienced before. He gasped as he suddenly realized how amazing Meng Hao's two wooden swords really were. He immediately descended into the North Sea to search for Meng Hao's corpse and the two swords. Deep in the North Sea, Meng Hao's body floated motionless, his eyes shut. It seemed he were dead. Ding Zin's violet chi from the east had wrecked his longevity and cultivation base. Though Ding Zin's power couldn't compare to Foundation establishment, he was at the 9th level's peak. Meng Hao was at the 8th level. He simply had no chance of surviving. Right now, his body was cold, and the only thing that remained was the tiniest spark, flickering inside his spirit. It wouldn't take long for that spark to vanish, and then there would be no more Meng Hao. His chi passages were shattered, his flesh devoid of life force. His core chi was completely dried up. But he was not willing to die. This was the cultivation world's law of the jungle. He couldn't resist it. As his body sank deeper and deeper, the spark of life grew more and more faint. Everything was quiet. The spark was about to go out. A wisp of chi flowed out from within the North Sea. A droning sound could be heard, and deep within the waters, ripples flowed out to surround Meng Hao. His body suddenly began to glow. As the glow spread, spiritual energy from the North Sea poured into Meng Hao from all directions, filling his body, mending his chi passages. Violet-colored blood spilled out from his orifices and pores. All of the damage inflicted by the violet chi from the east was mended. In fact, every single one of his numerous injuries were healed as the spiritual energy of the North Sea poured into him. Popping sounds rang out from within him as his chi passages began to flow again. His lifeless body was reformed, and in an instant, once again hummed with life force. A thunderous roar sounded out as vast amounts of spiritual energy rushed into his core chi. Once again, it rippled boundlessly. He was still at the 8th level of chi condensation, but had actually made significant advancement, and his current power level was almost as much as someone at the 9th level of chi condensation. Within his core chi, the demonic core undulated, sending out a demonic aura. It began to absorb all of the demonic chi that Meng Hao had accumulated. Its demonic aura grew stronger and brighter. Finally, Meng Hao opened his eyes. He looked calm. He was not excited or shocked or astonished. He had intentionally picked the North Sea as the spot for the showdown. It had all been a gamble in the hopes that the North Sea demon would help him. As he opened his eyes, he straightened his body. There was only water beneath his feet, although some distance away he could see the bottom of the lake. Everything should be pitch black, but because of the silvery sand that spread out, there was a little bit of a glow, which faintly illuminated the surroundings. Within the murky waters, Meng Hao could see a boat. The boat was dilapidated, sunken, and resting on the lake floor. Meng Hao suddenly realized that he recognized this boat. It was the boat he had ridden in that day when he crossed the lake. He stared silently at the boat, and then cupped his hands and bowed in respect. Even as he bowed, he heard the twittering laughter of a young girl echoing out across the lake bottom. The laughter circled around, making it impossible to determine its origin. Meng Hao narrowed his eyes, looking down at the floor of the lake. As the laughter rang out, he saw arms emerging from the silver sand at the bottom of the lake. The hands were all as white as jade. Along with the arms appeared corpses. They were the corpses of young women, floating up from the silver sand. Black hair swept across the faces of the dozens of them as they floated up from the depths of the lake. Their eyes were closed, their faces pale white but beautiful. Amidst the rippling lake water, Meng Hao watched on, an expression of astonishment on his face as he realized that all of the women looked exactly the same. At that same moment, a small girl appeared, standing there in the dilapidated boat. She gave Meng Hao a bashful smile. She seemed to be filled with childlike innocence, but as Meng Hao looked at her, his mind began to spin, and he felt a roaring inside his head. He had just noticed that the faces of the corpses strongly resembled this girl's face, as if they were her after she had grown up. "Big brother, will you stay with me here forever?" said the little girl with a light laugh. Her voice was young, and when she spoke, the dozens of corpses floating around her stopped moving, and despite their eyes being closed, it seemed as if all of them were looking straight at Meng Hao. Meng Hao's mind spun, and the roaring sound consumed his thoughts. Everything in front started to dim and shatter. He suddenly opened his eyes. He was still floating in the lake water, some distance from the floor, further away than before. Had it all been a dream? There was no boat, no corpses, no laughing girl. Meng Hao gaped in shock. After a moment, he realized his body had been healed. He gave a silent nod to the distant lake floor, though he couldn't see anything there. He knew that everything he had just seen had not been an illusion. It was real. He raised his hands in a deep bow. "Meng Hao will always remember your two great kindnesses. I speculate that you wish to become a sea, and that this is what is most important to you. I, Meng of the junior generation, promise that one day when my cultivation base soars to the heavens, I shall come to your aid. If there is any other way I can aid you, please tell me." Meng Hao bowed again, holding the bow for the space of 10 breaths. Everything was quiet. He straightened up. He looked down one last time, then shot up towards the surface of the lake. At the exact moment that he began to move toward the surface, his two wooden swords, which had sunk into the water, began to shake. Then, they shot toward Meng Hao. One of the swords had just been found by Ding Xin. His eyes gleamed as he reached out to pick it up, but then it began to move. Ripples spread from it, and in the blink of an eye, it shot off into the distance. Ding Xin's eyes widened. Without hesitation, he raced in pursuit. "This treasure is sentient," thought Ding Xin. His heart began to thump wildly as he eagerly sped even faster to intercept the wooden sword. Chapter 67, The Death of Ding Xin. Meng Hao sped along through the North Sea, moving faster and faster. The core sea within him seethed and roiled, and before long he caught sight of the surface of the lake. He burst out of the water, sending waves surging in all directions. At the same time as he shot out of the lake, his two wooden swords appeared, whistling through the air from different directions as they flew toward him. They circulated around him, one of them coming to rest beneath his feet, the other flying next to him. Just then Ding Xin burst out from the lake, and as he flew out, his eyes came to rest on Meng Hao. His face was immediately covered with a look of disbelief. How could it possibly be that Meng Hao was alive? Impossible. He's not a Foundation establishment. Nobody can withstand my sect's consummate violet chi from the east, backed by the sacrifice of my own cultivation base and longevity. He glared at Meng Hao, retreating slightly, still not quite believing what he was seeing. Perhaps he wasn't willing to believe because he was no longer at the 9th level of chi condensation. Even his 8th level was unstable. The wound in his chest wasn't healed, and spiritual energy continued to leak out. He feared he might slip to the 7th level. His face grew pale. However, unlike Qiu Shuhan and the others, he recovered quickly. Without hesitation, he shot away, the giant leaf appearing beneath his feet. He was fleeing, not fighting. He had no choice but to flee. He could tell that Meng Hao was completely recovered and had in fact improved his cultivation base, whereas he himself had suffered severe internal injuries. He had no other option than retreat. Meng Hao watched coldly as Ding Xin fled. He didn't pursue at first, but instead looked down at the lake, making yet another respectful salute. "I will remember this great kindness for the rest of my life," said Meng Hao in a voice that could sever nails and slice iron. He lifted his head and flicked his sleeve. The sword beneath his feet hummed, and he transformed into a radiant beam of light as he shot in pursuit. "Starting now, the hunter becomes the hunted," he said, his eyes filled with the intent to kill. After leaving the Reliance sect, Meng Hao had never felt the desire to kill anyone as much as he did Ding Xin, except perhaps Shangyuan Ziu. During his entire cultivation life, he had never been so seriously injured. In fact, it did not count as being injured. He had already been killed. A dazzling gleam filled his eyes as he raced in pursuit. In an instant, he left behind the North Sea. In the time it takes an incense stick to burn, he had caught up with Ding Xin, who was consuming medicinal pills even as his cultivation base continued to drop. Meng Hao lifted his finger, and the wooden sword flying next to him sped forward toward Ding Xin. Pale-faced Ding Xin looked back, well aware of the sword's strange powers. He smacked his bag of holding, and the long black bow appeared in his hand. Ignoring his continual loss of spiritual energy, he pulled back on the bow and shot an arrow. The arrow thundered toward the wooden sword. When they met, an explosion rang out and the arrow collapsed. The wooden sword shuddered. Meng Hao was expressionless. He lifted his finger again and the wooden sword sped forward again. Ding Xin, his face pale, had no choice but to shoot another arrow. A boom rang out. The wooden sword continued on. Veins of blood filled Ding Xin's eyes. Could he not see that Meng Hao was draining his cultivation base, pushing him toward exhaustion? After dropping from the 9th level, his injuries had worsened. He was weak but feared the sword, so he could only use arrows to defend himself. Because of his weakened state, his arrows were weak and didn't carry their former power. When he shot his 6th arrow, his body quivered as his cultivation base dropped from the 8th level to the 7th. The wooden sword stabbed into his chest. It wasn't a critical wound, but blood surged out. Ding Xin let out a miserable cry and tried to flee faster. His body shook as more spiritual power flowed out. His cultivation base fell rapidly from the 8th level to the 7th. His cultivation base wasn't actually regressing, but he was losing spiritual energy rapidly with no recovery. The loss was so great that his level of power was essentially at the 7th level. He was consuming medicinal pills, but unfortunately had 2 sword wounds, both of which were leaking spiritual energy. There was no way for him to recover at the moment. "I'm a Violet Fate Intersect disciple," cried Ding Xin. "If you dare to kill me, the Violet Fate sect will track you down even if it takes 100 years. They won't stop until you're dead." His situation was desperate. He let out a blood-curdling scream as Meng Hao's sword passed by. It didn't stab him but cut him, and his spiritual energy drained faster. "I've already died once," said Meng Hao coolly. His eyes were cold as he waved his finger once more. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. Ding Xin's miserable cries continued to ring out. His body was numb, covered with hundreds of sword wounds soaked in blood. None were critical, but he dripped with so much blood that he looked like a corpse. As things grew dim, what frightened him most was not his wounds but that his body had become like a sieve. Spiritual energy poured out at a shocking rate. The 6th level of qi condensation, the 5th, the 4th. A bang rang out, and Ding Xin fell to the ground, spitting blood. He scrambled forward as fast as he could. He was no longer capable of flight. His cultivation base had dropped to the equivalent of the 3rd level. Meng Hao, if you kill me, you will be slaughtered without proper burial. I'm a violet fate intersect disciple. If I die, it will cause problems for the entire state of Zhao. You don't dare to kill me. His body trembled as he fought back dread and coughed up blood. Meng Hao snatched up Ding Xin's giant flying leaf. Without a word, he moved his finger again, and the wooden sword shot toward Ding Xin. An incense stick's time passed. In the middle of the woods, Ding Xin no longer resembled a disciple of a great sect. He stared at Meng Hao, his eyes filled with venom and regret. He regretted not holding nothing back and killing him immediately. I should have butchered you, he said, gnashing his teeth. It seemed he was more interested in venting his anger than breathing. You know, you taught me something, said Meng Hao. He was done with his revenge. His hand lifted and the sword fell. Ding Xin's head flew into the air, showering blood everywhere. It landed off in the distance, rolling across the ground to rest underneath a large tree. His eyes were still filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe it because he was a disciple of the Violet Fate sect at the 9th level of qi condensation. He was a chosen. He was to reach foundation establishment, whereupon he would be a true chosen and his name would rock the southern domain. But here he was, dead in the backwater state of Zhao, killed by Meng Hao, an insect he had held in the palm of his hand. Meng Hao closed his eyes for a long time. This was not the first time he had killed someone, and he felt no emotions. He had already died. That day I ran into Yan Ziguo, I should have killed him and all the people with him. Determination filled his eyes. He had now experienced the result of his indecisiveness. I don't want to die a second time. He lifted his right hand and made a beckoning gesture. Ding Xin's bag of holding flew over. Then he flicked his sleeve and a flame python appeared. It consumed Ding Xin's body and head, turning them into ash. Meng Hao turned and walked away. Evening fell. As he walked off into the distance, snow began to fall. It covered him, his footprints, and the reek of blood. The snow accompanied him as he walked away. I am the snow during winter. If I get too close to summer, then summer will melt me. That is not the world of snow, nor is it my world. Meng Hao disappeared into the distance. He looked like a scholar, but deep down, he was as cold as snow. This chapter was sponsored by Jack Bullock.